I think extreme sports in general is pulling back. If you look at the trend for all of the sports, skateboarding, snowboarding, surfing, they all pull back in the same way because there was this glorious time where ad companies were like, let's just bombard people with extreme sports because that's how we sell our products.
On today's episode of the Grab Matters podcast, we welcome on a very special guest, Kellan Rudnicki. Kellan is the Director of Operations at Aktion Parks, which runs both Miami Water Sports Complex and Orlando Water Sports Complex. We dive into what that job entails, as well as cable park businesses in general. So we're talking about what he has seen that works when it comes to operating cable parks, what he has seen that doesn't work when it comes to operating cable parks, his advice for people if they were to start their own business in the cable park industry. We also dive into what he thinks an ideal cable park would look like. So if you had unlimited money, basically what it would look like to build the perfect wake park, to both be financially successful, but also to help get the most amount of people into the sport. We're also talking the past of action sports as a whole and how the decline of action sports has affected both wakeboarding and other sports as well as the future and his outlook on what the future of wakeboarding could look like. He's got some pretty exciting and positive thoughts on what the future could look like in America, specifically of cable wakeboarding. I just want to give a big thank you to all of the Patreon members. Your guys' support really helps keep this podcast going. So thank you so much for your guys' support. If you guys are interested in supporting the podcast, joining the Patreon is the best way to do so, as well as supporting the brands that support this show. Without further ado, let's dive into another episode of the Grab Matters podcast.
I approve waterboarding. They're talking about wakeboarding. The thing about wakeboarding, every trick is an invert.
Backside.
Air railings.
A new dimension.
All right, we're back. Another episode of the Grab Matters podcast. Today we welcome on a very special guest, Kellan Rudnicki.
Thank you so much for having me, Hunter. And first off, I want to give a massive shout out to you and everything you've done. Big fan of podcasts, driving up from Orlando and Miami all the time. And I mean, I'm always listening to an episode. On the way here, I was listening to Shop Talks number 5. So huge shout out to you. Anyone listening to this that's listened to multiple episodes and you're not part of the Patreon and you're not supporting, I'm a proud gold member of the Patreon.
He is.
I mean, come on, guys. You want wakeboarding to grow? This is exactly what we need. And I can't thank you enough for really kind of documenting this industry. I've learned so much about people that I do interact with, and it takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of hustle. And if you're out there, you can't spare $5, $10, $15 for wakeboarding, are you really a true wakeboarder? So hopefully we'll get a lot more signups from that one.
That was a good little ad there for
now
it.
You have to be nice. No hard questions. He just ripped up a paper of all the hard questions. There'll be low balls from now.
If anybody knows me after 50 episodes, that would never happen. So hard questions are absolutely coming, but that is very much so appreciated. That means a lot. I love that. And thank you to all the Patreon members. Everybody who is on there, big shout out, big thank you to you. Wake pants, yes or no?
I say yes. I don't think I have style for wake pants, though. So big yes. One of my favorite ones is style starts off the water. So it's really good to see. I love seeing that unique look to it. Also, it's really great when you're identifiable as a rider. That's
a good one.
If as a community, someone switches something up, you're like, who is that mystery rider? Whereas you got that same style. What I like the most about wake pants is that rider is going to do something a little different. And I love that in the sport. It's a creative element to it. So like when you do see someone out there in wake pants, you're going to get a different vibe.
Yeah, you get people's attention.
Yeah, so I love it. I think 100%.
All right. Favorite grab?
Stale. So I'm a big stalefish. It's stalefish back 1, stalefish back 3.
You're the stalefish back 1 guy.
Stalefish back 5. That's my competition. That's when I have a good run going in the jam, and I got one last one.
So you were talking heel side, backside 5 stalefish. So you're going up, grabbing stale, and then spinning the other way.
The 5 is a late one. So it's
a late one.
It's the first one, and then I touch it. Hopefully the judges see it, and then it goes there. But I'd say the favorite one is you just hold it on the 180, and then bring it there. Oh,
yeah.
Best feeling of wakeboarding is back 1. So big on stale, and then the only other ones I really have is nose and tail. So that's kind of where my
nose, tail, and stale. Okay.
Yeah, big left hand when it comes to the rotations.
That's fair. I feel like I've only gotten a couple stales. I think maybe Dallas Friday said stale. Could have been, maybe it was Amber Wing. I don't know. But yeah, stalefish. I love it. We're going to get into a lot of cable park business talk, operations, the future of wakeboarding, a lot of stuff. But I think before we do that, let's touch on just how you got into wakeboarding, because you started at Ski Rixen, right?
Oh yeah, huge shout out to Britta, Ski Rixen. Absolutely. I think the coolest part of being part of this industry for so long, and experiencing it myself is just how much wakeboarding and water sports can have a positive impact on someone's life. You know, I've seen it with myself. I've seen it with so many of our other members, but it's something that it'll shape you physically. And what I really love the most is it shows you progression. Like if you play a competitive sport, you know, are you getting better, or was the team worse? Was your team better? Was this a good opportunity? Like in wakeboarding, did you land it or not? And you can clearly see if I continue to put the effort into something, yes, I'll get better enough and then I can land it. I think it's such a huge thing to teach. You know, for myself personally, professionally, it's been something that was huge. And I'm so lucky. Again, I huge shout out to my mom because she was such an amazing person. I actually went to Ski Rixen the first time, part of a birthday party. And I remember when I was driving out there, I thought it was gonna be like boats and stuff. Like I'd been kneeboarding, I think, once behind like a friend's boat, and like I don't think I got up on my knees and I just got like pulled. I was like, that was impossible. I don't know how that's gonna work. So when we get to Ski Rixen, I'm expecting there to be boats and stuff in the water, and sure enough, there's this cable system, which is wild to see for the first time, which one of the banes of my existence is explain a cable park to someone who's never been.
It's just a zip line, right?
Well, you like a zip line with corners and towers, and so it's really,
you
really
can't.
tough.
I'll say this: you cannot explain what a cable park is without visual.
I almost
Like,
I
you
bring
couldn't
up
do
the
it.
I bring up the website. I'm just like, take a look at this.
Watch this video.
Yeah. Sit down for like 15 minutes, and then so once you convince them there, then you're pretty good. But I get there, and I just went kneeboarding that day. Like, you know, I'll never forget my first time off the dock. Super nervous. I just did the classic fly off the board. But I'll never forget the first time feeling like the pressure on the water. You know, like you're actually riding on the water. I was like, this is one of the cooler things I've experienced. Now, after that, I didn't go back to Ski Rixen for like a year or so. And this is a weird one. I was watching like top 10 extreme sports on Discovery Channel. Very, very weird thing that I was just randomly watching. It was talking about extreme sports, which again is something we'll talk about later, about how that as a genre was just so much more popular back there. And number one was kiteboarding. I was like, whoa, kiteboarding looks so cool. And I went to my mom, again, huge shout out to my mom. I was like, I want to learn how to kiteboard. She's like, okay, I guess we're going to try and figure this out. So we went to a coach in kiteboard to like try and get everything there. And he's like, you need to go to Ski Rixen and get board control. Huge shout out to that coach, because I think that is one of the best ways you can learn kiteboarding is actually getting board control. So, you know, my mom, she's like, all right, we'll get all your stuff. We're going to take you there. 40-minute drive to Ski Rixen. And then she would sit there for like 2-3 hours doing her paperwork while I just fell off the dock all the time and fell in the corner and walked back. But I kept doing it, and I got really lucky that I met some friends that I actually knew from my school went to Ski Rixen too. And it was like, oh my gosh, like, wow, this is great. And what that allowed us to do is one mom would drive out, one mom would pick up. And now we go from, you know, like once a month to kind of every other week or so was like the progression of it. And it was a slow progression. I mean, like I look back at it now and like, oh man, a lot of ways I wish I could go back and be like, these things are called fundamentals. Let's focus on that.
Was this your first board sport? Like, did you skateboard before? Obviously, you're in Florida, so not snowboard.
Like
but
barely. I bought like a Walmart skateboard that didn't work and like went down a hill on it a few times. Like I never really got into the board sport, so it definitely was like my first one. Fun part with Ski Rixen is since it is the counterclockwise, and I was left foot forward, so I was regular. Man, that first turn at 90 degree, it took me so long to get past. But when I finally did, it felt amazing. I was riding a kiteboard literally with sandals and fins. So I'm just kind of edging and carving, thinking that's the case. But at some point, we went back to the beach, and I was like, this is a lot of work with the kite and like, you know, ropes and things would get tangled. And I'm like, why don't I just go back to the park and ride more? So that was when I was like, okay, I guess maybe I'll just try wakeboarding. And then again, huge shout out to my mom. We went to like Sports Authority, got like the cheapest, crappiest wakeboard ever, went to Ski Rixen. Shout out to the general manager. I don't think it was Steve. I can't remember who it was, but they looked at it and they're like, no, we can't. Like, go return that. We'll do a deal for you. So first board was a
shout out them. That's huge.
No, it was like, oh, that board was so bad. It was like Velcroed, like probably not even a name brand. Someone just was like, hey, we're going to put a board together for Sports Authority. So I got my first real board. It was Liquid Force Omega. So I still had to have the gooey boots when you kind of put the soap in. And I mean, from there, it completely changed my life. Like, you have a identity, you know, when you're growing up, people search for it. I talk about it all the time when I'm like, you know, with our members, when you have a kid where they go from, you know, Billy 24 to Wake Billy, and that's now your identity.
Like the Instagram handle?
Yeah, it's super important. It really is. So like, I mean, because there's a lot of negative things out there that people can be like, this is my identity now, you know, and you're really searching for that kind of in high school or whatnot to stand out a little bit. And wakeboarding was my big thing. I mean, I was like, I love this. This is so much fun. I take my friends out to it. And again, not the best wakeboarder. I mean, I think we're sending pretty big Rayleighs because that's what you do. Off kicker though. So I have a fun story about air tricks, which I could never do them at Ski Rixen. And they were super popular at Ski Rixen. Like everyone's doing air tricks.
that one straight is like more air tricks have gone down there like than anywhere else in Florida.
And maybe potentially in the world. Like literally Ski Rixen when it was first there, like it was just like a bungee line. Like they would just do Indian rope and just fly around the thing. Like that probably is easily in the US, I would say. But I finally learned air tricks up in Orlando, and everyone at OWC is like, no, like what do you do at air tricks? So that was like kind of a little fun there. But I mean, I would say pretty sloppy, but I knew I loved wakeboarding. And I was like, okay, well, what are my options for college? And what colleges have a cable park next to it? That made my decision process very easy with UCF. And I actually only applied to UCF. So I'm glad I did get in because I didn't really have too many backups. But once that really took effect, I was like, okay, you know, now I can go up there and ride a lot more. And when I first got there, I mean, it's pretty intimidating. You go from riding kind of with people that you do know to like brand new people. That cable's fast, especially when you're used to like other cables. Like the
Which cable's fast?
OW's advanced cable is fast.
How fast is it right now?
Oof.
You know how fast it is.
Yeah, I do.
It's 30.5.
Yeah.
Let's just talk about that right now because why don't you run at 32?
So why would you say that that's the ideal speed?
Because I'm 200 pounds.
I think the hard part is for everyone who would say 32, they'd say run at 35. Like there's no sweet spot to it. I think the big one is, and even one thing, because I know when our one cable was down and we slowed it down, that got a little pushback there. But I'm also a fan of just get used to it at a different speed. You know, The speed's going to be the same. Then you should be able to do different things there.
I'm not saying 30 and a half is wrong. I mean, I think it's not incorrect to have preferences. Like I'm a bigger guy. I like going faster. I like going 32. Like if you were to say the perfect speed for you, me, 32. Like that would be the preference. I've ridden at 34, 36, 38. I don't, it's fun to like send big gaps at 38 or whatever, but like 32 for me is a good speed, but I don't think that like 30 and a half or even 31 is like too slow. You get used to it. Like, and I said it just in the shop talk. So if you're listening to that, like just get a little bigger of a board. As long as the cable is at a good height, which OWC is. If the cable's really low and you're going 30, like that could be a struggle, but I think 30 and a half, it's fine.
It's tough. And I mean, we have the benefit of two cables, which is like huge to kind of bridge that gap. So I feel like most cables have to kind of settle a little bit more in the middle.
Yeah.
But I just, again, the obstacles, the features, like everything was so much bigger in Orlando when I got there. And I'm like, ooh, this is going to be intense. And I mean, I rode there for a little bit, but I got super lucky. I met Brian Samir, Brandon Slack, and Chris Draper. They all went to UCF. They happened to like wakeboarding. And I'm so like, Brian came up to me one day. He was like, hey man, like that was pretty cool what you're doing out there. Like, do you like go to UCF or anything? Like we just came up that we came to UCF. And I'm so thankful for that because I was trying to find the wakeboard club at UCF from the second I got there. And it was impossible to find.
How couldn't you find it? I'm confused.
It got disbanded.
Oh.
So, and I get it. Because again, if you're in college, you have a lot of things, a lot of priorities. Huge shout out to all collegiate presidents out there who are taking time out of their schedule.
It is a lot of effort.
For very limited reward.
Yeah.
I guess a trip would be kind of the big one. Like,
and
it's
you get
cool
to put it on your resume.
Yeah, you get
a little bit.
But realistically, it's like a little blip. They say,
nobody cares about that.
What's wakeboarding? What's that about? So it's really one of those things where I will say it does give you good experience. So realistically, you do get better experience doing that than it actually shows on your resume.
For sure, yeah.
But it really is kind of out of the kindness of your heart that you want. I mean, dealing with a group of wakeboarders, it's tough. So I totally get it. And basically what happened is you have to fill out a few different forms each quarter, and it kind of got slacked. And eventually the UCF was like, there is no wakeboarding club anymore. So I found that out after a year of trying to contact them. Like I was like, what's going on here? Where's this at? And it looked like it was active, but basically like, it was my first fall, and then in January, they were like, it's not anymore. So I was like, okay, what do I need to do? And they're like, you need to got 12 people. You need to fill out this entire form thing and explain why it's good and stuff like that. So the original 4 people that I met, I was like, everyone find 2 buddies, and, let's get to 12. So we got to 12, and we go there, and we're like, all right, well, here's what we're doing. Here's what we want to do. And I'm so thankful for like that. Like, it's crazy how it kind of all fell into place with that. And as that happened, that was when really we were working with OWC. It was before Correct Craft did take over. So Director of Operations for Action, which is under Correct Craft. So it was still before then. And we worked out a deal for the wakeboard club to just get like a discounted Sunday. And we had that. We had the wakeboard club. And from there, I mean, it was just amazing. I love teaching. Like one of my favorite things is when someone else lands a trick, I get incredibly excited. When I land a trick, I'm usually like, oh, it's about time.
You're kind of relieved.
Yeah, it's like, oh, we're done with this.
I feel that.
Yeah, it's not as much fun as me getting stoked for every attempt when you're going off the dock. So I always love teaching that. And, you know, one of the benefits was being here in Orlando. I also had one of my great buddies from South Florida. He went to UCF too, and I had no clue. And I'm just wakeboarding, and I'm like, is that Ed? And Ed Alasko. He was the vice president for the wakeboard club, but he was a wake skater. And like, I just see him at the park and he's like, yeah, I rode my moped here from UCF. No, he rode his bike from like UCF, which is like a 45-minute.
Like a pedal bike?
Yeah.
Ooh.
He's a wake skater. I mean, they're going to DIY. We'll get there. So he got there, and it was really great having that group of people, but it really showed me like how much you can impact someone with the sport. Because again, at this point, you know, it's already kind of changed me, brought me to Orlando, all these different things. But we'd meet new people all the time, and you could teach them the sport. They would find it. They'd fall in love with it. They'd have a good time. And like, it just showed me how powerful water sports can be when it comes to, you know, building a community and having fun activities. And it just always seemed to get better when you were teaching more people. And that's just the favorite part with it. So I was like, oh, this is absolutely amazing. Correct Craft takes over. So I'm like, oh, this is great. My name's Kellan. You know, started working at OWC, which, I love summer camp. You said you worked at a cable before, right?
Mm-hmm.
What park was that?
Action Wake Park and West
nice.
Rock.
I love Action. Those guys are good. Oh, and West. Oh man.
Yo, that's the best Action cable park up there.
Hey man,
I'm just kidding.
They spell it with a C. What's always so funny?
Yeah, you guys spell it wrong. What's up with that?
Hey, it's called branding. You'll remember it. But no, those are great. Two great. I mean, shout out to Dan. Me and Dan like talk all the time. I'm going to give him a lot of shout outs, but the cable park owners and things like that, and just everyone who worked there. I mean, you kind of experience what it's like, again, to teach and to get people on the water and share your passion. And that was such an amazing opportunity that I had. I was like, oh, this is great. You know, I'll end up working for Action, and we'll you know, I'm basically interning. We'll do like a marketing role. Long story short, we ended up not having the budget for it as soon as I graduated, which like, I'll never forget kind of doing closing duties at OWC one night, and it was just like, oh, so sad.
Playing closing time on the
radio.
I
mean, you basically like, I gotta grow up, do a different job.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, if summer camp, like, I loved it. It was the best, you know, teaching all that stuff. So it's like, all right, well, I guess we'll work downtown Orlando, but I kept riding. You know, that was a big thing. I was like, okay, when I do have time, you know, after work, I'm gonna come out here, I'm gonna ride. Did that for about 2 years, was on the points chase team, which is absolutely amazing. Like, that's so much fun. You know, huge shout out again to the community for still keeping me the kooky college guy doing whirly birds and whatnot all over the place, part of the team and whatnot, just, you know, making me feel welcomed at the park. And then eventually, you know, and I think this is a huge message to anyone out there is, you know, there's no reason to ever be upset about an outcome of something. You know, obviously, yeah, did I not feel good? And could I have been like, I can't believe you guys, this is terrible. Like, it's like, no, I get it. You know, we'll carry on. And I think being known essentially in the industry from the wakeboard club and just trying to help out as much as I could, I just stayed on the radar for Correct Craft in the sense of, hey, we're looking for someone that, you know, the big one is they're looking for someone who's really passionate about wakeboarding and water sports. It's a very tough business model. And if you don't understand the experience or what people go through, I think it's very, very easy to make missteps. And with them basically looking to me, they just wanted someone who had a lot more experience. So got the call from Bill Jurgen, who I just have incredible respect for, you know, as a businessman and just in general. And yeah, they said, hey, we want to take a chance and take a look at this, you know, interview process, all of that. And I mean, I had given up essentially on the idea that I would be in this position, and to kind of have it come out of nowhere was one of the most surreal experiences ever. So, you know, I'm internally thankful for that. But with that being said, I now find myself in charge of potentially these cable parks that, you know, you have a lot more work now in front of you. So I knew it was going to be a big opportunity, a big task. And essentially it's like, hey, do you want to get back into wakeboarding? And the passion part of me was just like, yep, let's do it. So that was a no-brainer to me. And, again, that's kind of where I'm at now. And it's just amazing because I think so many people have so many different stories out there of why the sport impacts them and how they get involved. And yeah, I'm just one other cool story out there where how the sport's impacted people.
Okay, so we're talking Aktion Parks. We got a quick Patreon question from Josh Boyle, and he's wondering, do people ever confuse Aktion Parks with the infamous and legendary New Jersey Aktion Park? You know what I'm talking about?
I do. That place is pretty gnarly.
Has anyone ever confused the two?
I would hope not. I don't think I've ever had that come up, but man,
they're far enough away that the
yeah. Oh man, that's a fun one. If you haven't seen Aktion Parks, that other one, you should probably Google it or take a look.
It's like a documentary, right? That they did on it. Yeah, watch that. That's very good. So speaking of Aktion Parks, though, so like, what is your job? I guess, like, what do you do day to day?
So title is director of operations, but really the way that I like to put it is I just try and help the park managers and the parks function. So I really break it into kind of like little buckets. You have your daily tasks, which is again with a cable park. Something could go wrong at any point in time.
And will.
You really, at some point in time, something is going to go wrong. Then really weekly ones, which are kind of like, how are we doing? What's kind of the marketing efforts here? What's, the typical meetings that we're doing? Like, there's just kind of a flow to it where each day then adds into the week. And you have your monthly goals, obviously, making budget as any business needs to look at their monthly, operations. And then there's yearly. And really, I would say the daily ones are more like, how can I help? How can I be that extra person? I'll still do like lessons out there. I love it. I'm like, oh, you need a hand? Don't worry, I got this. Like, that's still really fun to me. And then the monthly and the yearly, though, I think that's really forecasting, a lot of Excel, a lot of presentations. Where are we at? Correct Craft does an absolutely amazing job of really giving you the autonomy to function as a business. But obviously, being a successful company like that, they have their standards and everything that you need to match. So you have those obligations to meet, and it's kind of filling in the dots to get there.
Yeah, for sure. So we're talking two parks, right? Miami and Orlando Water Sports. So I'd be remiss to ask what happened to Elite Cable Park because that was under the Aktion Parks umbrella, correct?
Yep, very true.
So yeah, I guess just kind of run through that, I guess, the Elite Cable Park situation.
Yeah, I mean, for those probably aware in the industry, we did close down Elite Cable Park at the end of last year. And the big thing is there's a lot of macro issues just facing wakeboard parks, I would say, in general. Insurance being one of the big ones. But it's really one where, like, you don't go into the wake park business because it's a proven moneymaker. It's not like, oh, you open up a McDonald's franchise and here's the, X profitability.
Here's the forecast.
It's still such a new industry and a new sport that really it comes down to trying to figure out, is this a good combination? Will this work? And, I give Correct Craft just tremendous credit because we tried. We really tried. We gave it our full effort. Theo out there was an amazing general manager, like Brandon Fuentes, who's now working with us at Orlando. Like, the team out there was phenomenal. And the people out there were amazing. It's just one of those things where even if, the product and everything there are working, the pure business fundamentals that sometimes can be really tricky. And I think, you're seeing it a lot with some other cable parks that are shutting down. And it's tough with that operation. At some point, again, we tried as much as we could for as long as we could. At some point, as a business, you have to essentially say, we did everything that we could. No one wants to make this decision. That's not the fun part.
You don't build it to tear it down. I
loved opening the park. That was amazing. Great feelings all around. And then closing it, again, the complete polar opposite. And the one that, I really feel for the team because, again, they did absolutely amazing job there. But, the community, you see the impact, you see the kids, and you're like, oh, it's a tough one. But, again, we did everything that we could out there. I really have no regrets. If we could have made it work and we would have done it, and we were searching for everyone there. But at the end of the day, you have to make business decisions. And if you don't do that, you don't get to the level that, of success that someone like Correct Craft will have in the sense of just the operation. So push comes to shove and you have to do it. But again, the amount of wakeboarders we made out there, the amount of people who are into the sport now, they still go to OWC to ride. It's such a net positive that I'm so happy that Elite Cable Park was out there and that we were able to operate for how long as we did.
Yeah, and now OW's got another couple of rails, so the setup's even better.
I mean,
you got a
silver linings.
Silver linings and everything. Where is that cable now? Do you know, the actual physical cable? Because you guys said you took it down. I mean, is it?
So we, in exchange for taking it down, we basically handed over the ownership of it. That's kind of like a little tit for tat of, hey, if you take down the cable system, you can then retain ownership of it. I have no clue where the actual final destination is, but it's one of those things where, there's very specialized people in the industry. There's only a few of them kind of
Mike
out
Olson is one who probably, if you're wondering where this cable is, he could figure it out and get you a price on it, I'm sure. If you're interested.
We did make notice like, hey, if anyone wants to purchase or anything there, but there wasn't really like a hot list of people. So we're like, hey, if you do take this down, we'll go ahead and really make a deal for you when it comes to that.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. I was just curious on Elite and all that. So let's talk about, before we move on, I want to talk about collegiate wakeboarding a little bit more, because I think collegiate wakeboarding is a really important thing in America. Maybe not in the rest of the world. They might not understand what I'm talking about, but collegiate wakeboarding and collegiate skiing and snowboarding, I think, kind of go hand in hand. I'm from the Midwest, so I was on a collegiate alpine team, skiing, snowboard, and it was the best time of my life. Like it was awesome. So much fun. And B, it was like a great way that I saw people that wouldn't usually ski and snowboard. Some of them straight up just learned, and others, learned as a kid, but wouldn't probably have kept doing it if it wasn't for this, college team. And I just kind of want you to speak to the importance of how important it is to the industry, and B, how we can maybe continue to grow it, because I think it's a great way to get a bunch of people into the sport.
Oh, 100%. I mean, for best times, all of the
really
memories. It's so much fun. Like, you should join a wakeboard or an extreme sport club. Like, you should be joining clubs in college. But when you find, an action sport, it's really so much fun. Such a great group of people. And I do completely agree. I will say my favorite contests are collegiate contests. The vibes are just immaculate.
So high.
Everyone's having a great time. You really are. People are trying, it's so much fun because, again, they kind of, and I think there needs to be a level of seriousness in any sport. You have to have essentially the best of the best, are really putting it down here. But then there's also a group of people who understand that, hey, we're just here having a good time in college. We're not really looking to go pro or anything there. We're just getting our degrees and whatever. So let's have a great time. And it really is a blast. But I think what's super important is exactly what you mentioned. It really furthers people's engagement in the hobby or the sport. And there's really no one better for growing the sport, in my opinion, than kind of the college level. Because if you get that ability, and this was always, again, one of the big views that Careercraft had with Action is, if we get people on the water, and they get the means to eventually afford a boat, I put myself in that page, I'm going to get a boat, because it is something where you learn the hobby, you learn the sport. It really brings you into it. And where you're at in college, you're kind of at a very, almost kind of like that last turning point, I would say, before you really set in. And if you have a good enough experience, like, you were talking about, and obviously like what I had, you're now part of the sport forever. Whereas we might lose you in, we lose kids to high school sports, we lose kids in college to life, and it comes up, you only have such a limited time. So collegiate sports are huge. I will say, unfortunately, what it does look like is COVID really impacted the collegiate element. One of the best events that we had was the Spring Classic, and then we did the USA Wakeboard Nationals with Kathy Williams. We worked with her on that. We had 160 participants in boat and cable, 13 teams. It was insane. I was like, this is amazing. And then we were planning again for year 2, and 2020 happened. So we kind of pulled back on that one, and we're putting it back together. We had another Spring Classic. We're going to do another event and another nationals. But I think it's just kind of a recovery for the colleges to understand, because essentially what happens is, if you don't have something planned out like a year in advance with the budgeting process, it's kind of school by school. But if you don't have things planned out like that, then it's really hard to get funding. So I totally get it, but we're trying to fix that.
Yeah, and for the context for the listeners, these 13 teams are coming from all over the country.
Oh,
right?
Missouri, Oklahoma, and it's so great. They bring you get a whole bunch of people from Oklahoma down in Florida experiencing a cable park, and I loved it. We had people who have never ridden cable coming down here just for the boat side, and they have people who've never ridden boat coming down just for the cable side, trying both, because you need to feel a team for both, and it was the best. So a huge recommendation to joining a collegiate team out there.
Yeah, absolutely. Or if you're at a college and there isn't one, pull a Kellan and just get 12 people together
I will
and
say,
start one.
Quick shout out I do want to give to Sean Rysack, who is the president after me, Camden Vaughn, who is the president after Sean, and then Ricky Tarr now, who is president. And what's crazy is they always get better than me. I have yet to have a president.
That's good. Yeah. There you go.
It is good, but at some point I'm like, guys, stop getting good.
Well, you kind of restarted it.
You're making me look bad.
We got another Patreon question from Bill Porter, And he's wondering, are there plans to once again bring back boat contests to the boat lake at OWC? He's saying this site was such a vital part of grassroots in professional wakeboarding for decades. And he's just wondering if there's a plan to kind of like return to that shoreline and do a boat contest ever.
I wouldn't say it's off the table. I just think the hard part is what we've kind of seen with events in general. Usually when we were doing events at the park, it more or less was essentially because we wanted to, continue to promote the sport and grow it. It wasn't like, oh, let's do an event. It'll be a massive moneymaker. People will come. Like, it was really us saying we want to give back to the sport and do it. And the hard part is, again, with, the way that we did pull off OWC, the phase 1 and the renovations there, a lot of the land was moved and there's a lot of favors, and things of that. So I could see it definitely coming back, but I think the hard part is, what does that event look like? And again, I was there for Wake Games. I think it was like 2013 or 2012. I think Harley was like the big guy at that point in time. So I'm not quite sure what year that was. And I've seen how massive, of an appeal that is. And I just think that market, as we've kind of seen, is pulling away a little bit. So I think that's the hard part is, it would be a lot of additional work and development for something that I'm not quite sure if it would make more sense for us to do that or something else. Like, that's the hardest thing. They're all great ideas and I'd love to execute on all of them, but you basically have to say which one is actually going to help us move the needle. Because if we do that, then we can get funds for other things.
It'd be cool if you did like an old school throwback contest. You yanked a couple of rails over there, and you towed it behind like a older style boat. And
if only I knew someone that had like a whole bunch of older riders out here for a throwback on a podcast or something like that. A lot of connections.
Hey, I think it's a good idea. I mean, obviously you got.
I'm open for discussions.
As long as the shoreline's packed with people partying, that's kind of all I would really care about.
That was the cool thing with kind of the Collegiate one is like having all like 160 people out there. Yeah. It was almost kind of like, wow, like this is, again, I can only imagine what like, the 2000, like the early 2000 events were.
Packed shorelines.
Oh yeah. And like, I can that's definitely the vibe. Like, I would totally get why the pros are like, that is so much more fun to ride in.
Well, Wakefest Tennessee just happened a little bit ago, and like it looks like it emulates that vibe. I still haven't been. I really want to go, but it looks like that is exactly what it used to be is going on there. And they got a massive purse, and it's like, it looks sick. It just looks awesome. I mean, so it can be done, I think. And I don't know, maybe OWC could or could not happen. It'd be cool to see something come back, I think.
Yeah, I would definitely say it's a very good possibility.
Yeah, 100%. And now for a quick word from the Canvas shop, which is home to skiboatcovers.com. So if you need a new ski boat cover, skiboatcovers.com is the place to go. They have you covered. Family owned and operated for almost 50 years, they've been manufacturing top quality, custom fitted, American made covers for both ski and wake boats. Made with durable, weather resistant materials, their covers are built to outlast factory covers and competitors' covers alike, while always protecting your boat from the elements, ensuring it stays in pristine condition year round. They are easy to install and designed to fit perfectly. They are the best choice when it comes to aftermarket covers for your boat. Don't let the rain, sun, debris, or anything ruin your ride. You got a nice boat, get a nice cover for it. If you need a new cover for your boat, visit skiboatcovers.com. They have you covered, literally. And when you do, make sure you use code GRAB50 at checkout for $50 off your order. I think we shift into a guest question from Daniel Jarrett. We brought him up earlier, but I'm going to go ahead and play that here.
Oh, boy.
What's up, fellas? This is Daniel from West Rock. First off, Kellan, just want to say how much I appreciate you and our friendship and everything you've done for me over the years and your willingness to pick up the phone and bounce ideas and just, this is a lonely road in the cable park world, especially in the U.S., so it's just great having friends like you to do it with. My question is just kind of a broad one. I mean, I'm sure you guys have touched on some of this in this episode already, but what is the thing that's on the tip of your tongue, your current soapbox, something that you really are passionate about that you want to share with the Grab Matters audience? There's so many things that I would say you're an expert on, but I think there's some passion topics that boil out every time I talk to you. And I'd love for you to share, what do we need to hear from you about how do we grow the sport? Something like that. Anyway, appreciate both of you guys. Thank you, Hunter, for Grab Matters and what you're doing. Can't wait to hear this. See ya.
Thanks, Dan. That was a good question.
Oh, man. Now I get my soapbox off. All right, here we go. Now we take out the gloves. First off, shout out to Daniel Jarrett. If you've ever been to West Rock, you just feel the passion everywhere. And such an amazing person. Fun little story about Daniel. We went to Nationals for the Quarry for points chase. We went to West Rock. While we were just there, and again, I'm working downtown, not in this role, me and Dan had like a chat for like 2 hours, like just talking. And again, I'm not in the industry really. I'm just like, yeah, you know, super passionate about this, talking all of that stuff. We stayed in contact. He was actually like, besides my mom, like the second person I called up. I was like, hey, you're not going to guess what just happened. So,
Wow.
no, it's really crazy. Again, this industry is super close because, again, it's a lonely path, as Dan mentioned. The hard part with that question is I feel like I'm like, what of the individual things that we've had, like that we've talked about, might he be alluring to? But I think the big one that I've been really talking about now is the biggest thing for the wakeboard industry right now is we just need more people on the water, which means more beginners, which means being as inclusive as possible. I just think you have to build that base of riders up, and the more the base builds up, then the more benefit everyone, you know, kind of higher up, whether it's in the industry, whether it's professional, whether it's a cable park owner, they're going to get that benefit. And I think where I get passionate is, you know, to me, I think it's way more important for potentially like a pro wakeboarder to just go up to someone at a park, and you don't even need to really be a pro wakeboarder. You like, you know, I mean, I remember growing up at Ski Rixen, someone does an air trick over me. I'm like, whoa, like this guy's so cool. Just going up to someone and basically trying to be inclusive, like actually being aware of the environment and thinking, how can I help grow this sport? Realistically, I think if you just go up to another rider who's either, you know, trying something or whatnot, hey, you know, my name's Kellan. What are you doing there? Oh, have you ever tried this? That is such a huge, huge element versus, and again, you know, I'm always blown away with what the pros can do. You know, I feel like anyone in extreme sports, you know, you have a lot of my respect because that is really, really tough every single day what you're doing. But I just really feel like where we're at as a sport, the thing that matters more now than anything is really trying to get those beginner riders. And that means things like feeling inclusive. So I think one thing, and I think now's a good one, like I said, I'm getting my soapbox. Oh, come on, man.
Oh, boy.
There we go. I would say, I think, quick question. Do you think, oh, come on, man, or this podcast is, percentage-wise, what do you think is more beneficial to wakeboarding as a whole?
Well, I've put a lot more effort into this podcast than I did Oh Come On Man. But, I mean, I think they serve two different goals and two different purposes.
I agree.
This one for sure. I mean, definitely the podcast.
And I think there is a room for it, especially on the professional level. You know what I mean? Calling out, things like that.
Yeah.
But what I will also mention is it has a pull-down effect. And here's the thing. I will say this, if you're funny, like you kind of get a point with me. You know what I mean? Like, again, if it comes out and I'm like, okay, that's pretty funny. But it will boil down to the community. And basically, while you're very funny and you know, look at the pros for it, it will then breed down to our 13 to 17-year-old wakeboarders there that are like, oh, if you zeech, you're terrible. And again, which at the pro level, yes, you are a professional. This is designed for it. But hey, these are kids that are learning. You know, these are kids that are, you know, I always say you have to learn the trick first, then you can do the style. And it can have a negative impact, I feel like, when we kind of get, you know, more specific about like, is this good? Is this bad? Like, I almost feel like we're infighting for no reason at times.
Yeah.
But any sport's going to have drama. You know what I mean? I'm not going to want to be like, oh, everyone, you know, let's all kumbaya and come together. That's going to happen. But I think just being aware of it. Whereas, again, what you're doing here is hugely impactful. You know, I think it's amazing effort into this. But still, you did a lot of effort. Oh, come on, man. Those are good edits.
And I would like to say that it didn't take me long to make those stupid edits, but I have no idea what I'm doing when it comes to editing, so it took me way too long to figure that shit out.
Dude, they were good. They were great. I'd go in the comment section, but it has an impact.
And I think a lot of people maybe didn't understand the satirical nature of it. Like, I tried to make it so in your face that, like, it's obviously satirical. Like, I'm not taking this that seriously, but like, I obviously was trying to accomplish a goal of pretty much every pro rider was like sieging their face off. And I was like, it's like 2018 or whatever. What are we doing out here, guys? And like, that's an interesting point because it definitely does like funnel down to the young kids who are super impressionable. And it's like, it can be the wrong way in the mindset of those kids for sure. But I also think making a sport look good to other people is somewhat important, and like wakeboarding has had a very bad reputation in other sports' eyes. Coming from the Midwest, at least I've seen that, and so that was like something I was frustrated about, I guess. So
I totally agree. And I think I will go back to it accomplishes two different points.
No regrets is what I'm saying.
So, I would say, again, I'm not out here to be like, I finally got you. All the damages you've caused. And again, it trickles down in that sense. But I would also think that's another thing that I would say. I don't think it matters what other board sports really think about us right now. I think all that matters is we get more people wakeboarding. Because even if you're a hardcore snowboarder and you're good at snowboarding and you go to wakeboarding and you're not as good as wakeboarding, there's going to be in the back of your mind, it's like, yeah, no, snowboarding is cooler because I'm better at it.
Well, every snowboarder is going to, every snowboarder, no matter what, is going to say snowboarding is cooler than wakeboarding.
That's what I'm saying. So what
but there are snowboarders in the Midwest who, when wakeboarding was super zeechy, it's still, I mean, it isn't as much as it anymore, but like when it was, they wouldn't do it because they're like, that sport's dumb because they're super zeechy. So like, well, it doesn't matter as much as, people might think it does. I think there's an element to it where like it does kind of matter a little bit.
I think that's where we would probably debate like the actual, like, again, this is something
the numbers. No, it's not. It's not going to move the needle for sure. And it's more of like I'm calling myself a wakeboarder, and I don't want people to think of like a zeech and kooky sport as like the sport that I love. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? That's kind of, I think, where it comes down to, where people are like, I'm a pro wakeboarder. I don't want them to think pro wakeboarding is dumb. I want to make wakeboarding look good, which they should. Everybody should try to do that, right? But at the end of the day, that's not what's going to, move the needle. We were talking before this, like 98% of people on ski and snowboard hills are, quote unquote kooks. Yeah. But they're the ones who support the entire industry and buy all the gear, who can allow the pros to be paid professional pros. So like, and they're not the ones who are going to be following Oh Come On Man or caring about zeeching or any of that stuff. Like all they want to see is like a good community that's inclusive, that they can come into and like do an enjoyable activity.
100%. And that's why like you're essentially preaching to the choir of wakeboarding when you're kind of doing that. And if you make it more inward focus in that, I just feel like, again, all of that effort, if you just go to talk to someone at a cable park, you're going to accomplish more for wakeboarding.
For sure. 100%,
or take someone on a boat. I know obviously I'm very cable focused, but like those are the things that are really going to help out. And it's something that everyone can do too. I know everyone listening to this right now that's going to go to a cable park probably the next 2 days or 3. I have a challenge for you. Just go talk to someone. They're on the beginner side. They're hanging out. They're having a great time. And you're the cool people. Like you really are. You're like, no matter whether maybe to you, and I don't, it's always so funny because like to you, you're like, I'm not that good at all. Like I've had Trent Stuckey and Gavin riding like my entire time at OWC. So I've always had.
You always compare yourself to someone that's better, and you're like, well,
yeah, there's a whole massive amount there. But again, when you grow, like growing up, just someone who talks or just is like interactive with you. And that is the best thing you can do for any park owner or operator, anything like that. Just have a nice conversation. And I think that is my biggest soapbox right now, where I feel like if we are complaining about a lot of different things, this is pulling back or what's going on here, build the base. More money will come. Yeah. I mean, that's it, 100%. So you can, woe is me and keep going kind of this down path, or you can actually just like, I would love to know the number of people that have really gotten into the sport, just again, summer camp and wakeboard club and all of those things there. But if everyone was kind of a little bit more focused on that, we'd have a much bigger sport. And the other thing we were talking about too is, the snowboard resorts and things like that. Those are generational. You have generations of people going to snow resorts. We're really only at that first generation now of wakeboarding where it's going to continue to compound and it's going to continue to grow. And, again, we're going to get into extreme sports and, is wakeboarding dying? But that's one of the reasons why I'm very, very optimistic about water sports and amazing experience. It's so good for everyone. And I just think, again, we just have to all come together and work. So more community versus the decisiveness there. But again, Oh Come On Man, I'm still going to say it was really funny and it serves its purpose. If you're a professional wakeboarder, you are showing your wakeboarding off. That is essentially what you should focus the most on.
Do you think it was a net negative? Oh Come On Man?
No, not at all. I think I just wanted to put it question to you.
Oh, more people should do that. Nobody.
Yeah, no, because I don't think it was a net negative because I don't think it moves the needle. Like literally, I think it was good. There's a bunch of pros in the comments. Who is this guy? What's going on here? Okay.
Well, okay. See, and this is where I would push back a tiny bit. Like, I think there's a problem in wakeboarding where it's cable wakeboarding specifically, where people get into wakeboarding for a couple, 2-3 years, and then for whatever reason they stop. And I don't understand that.
Ooh, great. I'm glad you asked me that because it is something I see all the time. And I think there's There's a few
I can
different
have some
elements
simple
to it.
explanations, but I'm curious your thoughts.
I would think the big, like, again, we see a lot of people, they get a sport, you know, baseball, football. If you're in high school, you're going to lose out of that. But typically I would say it's like the college one, or a little bit older from there. And I think the big one I want to point to, I think a lot of times you just have to choose time with life. And if there's not a cable park that's easy to you, I think that's like I would say that's probably the bulk of it, is it just becomes harder for you to do. And again, another one I point to is community. If I'm riding by myself, nowhere near as fun. If I'm riding with a group of people that I enjoy, I'm going to keep doing that, you know, once a week, whenever I'm off work. And we see that, like we see the groups that do come through. I think the one I'd really like to talk about more, which is like honestly the sadder one, is people who are in the industry, who are riding for a bit and then they're done. And I really think what it comes down to is you can only be so passionate for so long if there's not like at some point in time, you have to say, am I really doing this? Like, is there an opportunity for me? And again, if the base is growing, there's going to be more opportunities. But I see so many incredibly skilled, talented people who they never get the opportunity. And at some point in time, the bills come knocking and you just don't have that opportunity. And then now you're busy with all of this and what you're still going to go out there and do this when like things start to add up for you. And that's what I love the most about the base element. And I mean, like you know, in college, I wanted to work for Action and Correct Crafts. We just didn't have enough for the budget there. And it's a question that, you know, I've actually had myself with other employees. Because again, you know, I'd love to continue to promote and have an upward, you know, trajectory for people. But at some point, you hit a floor or the ceiling of it. And I think that's when your passion kind of starts to grind. And I would say that's more specifically for people who are within the industry. Because I think the sad part is we lose a lot of incredibly smart, talented people, especially people who are kind of on the fringe, maybe not the best rider. You know what I mean? So they're not like really seen, but they're skilled at other things that are super beneficial. Maybe they can host a podcast, you know, little things like that. And I point to myself too. You know, I'm someone who's incredibly passionate about wakeboarding, but I was always loved business, you know, 2 degrees in business management and things like that. And I just think it's really, really tough for anyone to make that call and that decision. So it's sad, but that's, I think what happens is you just run into that wall.
Yeah, and I think there's like there's other factors to it. I think a big reason pickleball has gotten so explosively big is, I mean, it's pickleball, it's mini tennis, but like there's a big community aspect. Like it's such a community driven sport, and it's competition throughout each level. You know, I'm not fully versed on pickleball. I've never played it, but like you're a level pickleball player and you go play, and it's like a whole community thing. And then I think another thing wakeboarding has struggled with in the past a little bit is like a media and event side of things, where when I grew up snowboarding, there's a website called YoBeat, and I would obviously check Snowboarding Mag, Transport, like all these snowboard outlets religiously because I wanted more. I couldn't get enough of it. Same with wakeboarding when I got into it. But if you don't have that for the kids to like obsess over, the kids who really get into it and are going to go tell their friends at school about it because like, hey, I just read this article, I just watched this video, you got to watch it, you got to come wakeboarding with me, this is the coolest thing. If you don't have anything to like eat up as a kid or someone who's getting into it, the sport almost doesn't seem real to you because it's like, is it real? Like, or is it just me at the cable park? Like, is there a bigger thing that I can like really latch onto? And so I think that's been another like compounding factor. I think it's several different things as to why we've had issues, at least in America. I can't really speak to, you know, other areas in the world, but
I think you're nailing it. And I think now is actually a good time to kind of hop into where I see like the start of wakeboarding and kind of what happened, mainly with the extreme sports boom.
Yeah.
So I really think the big thing that happened is there was a heyday for extreme sports in general, probably from like the early 90s to 2008 and then maybe a little bit after that, where it was like this golden time where it was now cheap enough to have camera that you could take somewhere. It was still an expensive camera. And then a lot of businesses and a lot of different ad companies, and just if you really think about extreme sports in general, the major product is kind of content. Like that is the major thing that we are providing is really content to look at and to watch. Compared to something like, you know, football, where it's like you actually have a team that you go up against. There's, you know, you work for the owners of the team and all of that stuff. This is mainly people think it's cool what you're doing. It looks cool. So what happened is there was a ton of marketing spend that just got pumped into it because it became easier instead of, you know, creating this entire commercial or doing this thing. Let's just go follow extreme sports people. And I mean, Fuel TV was literally a TV station for that. And it was a massive, massive boom. I mean, that's when everyone had their video game. I know there was like an inline skating video game. You know, Sean Murray got his game. There's a surfing game. Like, people basically, when the markets move, they can overreact to some degree. And I just really feel like that was the extreme sports boom. You know, you have Capri Suns, like everyone's popping up.
Well, and you got every energy drink going full in on action sports.
Action sports was the leading marketing for that heyday. Like, that was the affordable content there. The big issue now is we have cameras on our phones, and that content generation has shifted to individuals more so than, you know, an extreme sports athlete, which, again, if you look at it from, I think, like a business point of view, you're like, oh, this person's incredibly talented. They have a brand, you know, it makes sense to work with them. And I think what we've seen now is, because it's even easier to work with an influencer who's doing all the stuff themselves, and you just go, oh, here we go. All of that ad money basically moved away from extreme sports and into just content creation or just other avenues. And why I think that hurts wakeboarding the most is, of all the other sports, if you look at them, so generational. You know, they were very organic when they came about. You know, people just making surfboards and going out there and trying to ride these things. People making snowboards on a mountain, getting yelled at by skiers because they're, you know, like, there's a whole slow movement to it. What I feel like happened with wakeboarding is it came about right as the extreme sports boom was happening with ads, and boat manufacturers like, this is a great way to sell boats. And you literally have a sport overnight almost. And I think what happened is we boomed with that. And as the shift in extreme sports has happened, it's kind of pulled away. Because, like, to your point, yeah, we do want to have a hub of information and things like that. But if you look at the numbers, surfing or skateboarding is like 100 times bigger than wakeboarding, like overall addressable market. Then you have surfing, which is about 5 times the size of it. And then you have snowboarding, which is like 3 to 5 times. Like, it kind of depends there. So if you take like what we have and just kind of double those numbers there, then you get those things. You know, you get the development.
Well, because it's sustainable. There's money in it, you know.
I mean, like, if there's money, there will be business, there will be opportunities. Yeah. And I think what happened is just extreme sports in general really lost the ad revenue effect of it. Because I saw one thing where, like, someone's like, why are there influencers on X Games? Because X Games trying to get eyeballs back on it. So then they
just did a really poor job of doing it.
Yeah.
But yeah,
I mean, you know, that's the problem, is like, it's all about execution. Yeah. But at the end of the day, it's essentially businesses sitting around and going, how do we get eyeballs on this? And I think that's the hard part that's happening in wakeboarding now, is when you have something, you know, easy built, if things pull away from it, then kind of the gaps will show there. But again, that being said, you know, you did mention pickleball, and I think wakeboarding being more like pickleball is like the best thing. Just because think of all the stuff that's happening in pickleball. People are rushing to build pickleball arenas, and people, how can I build more pickleball in downtown? Like, I want a luxury. That would be the greatest thing for us if we had the pickleball effect. We'd have cable parks everywhere. People will be throwing money at cable parks and wakeboarding. So it really is kind of, you know, you have to get that more general public. And the hard part now is there was a time where people were just Rocket Power and Capri Sun and, you know, top 10 extreme sports on Discovery. They've probably never aired that since, you know, I saw it all those times ago. So it's all of those things are kind of, it makes it harder. It doesn't make it impossible. It just makes it harder for us. And, you know, I think that's what a lot of the pros and a lot of the riders and a lot of the people who are in the sport, we're just going to continue to experience to some degree. But again, I think eventually it will get generational where, like you said, you know, people aren't going to the snow, you know, they're not going to the ski resorts to do extreme things. They're going with their family to ride. Yeah. And you're seeing that now more and more. You're going to see families that are teaching their kids how to wakeboard because they enjoyed it. And time's on our side. But right now it's just, again, a difficult period. And I would really point to just mainly marketing in the sense of, you know, that was such a massive benefit for, I mean, you know, you had stickers on your board. People were like, yep, this is enough. That's all I need. I need stickers on board. Now you have an influencer who has a link directed to the product that you have that will show you when they buy.
Yeah.
You're up against a lot of...
Well, it's completely different time we're dealing in.
Exactly.
So you have to operate differently. You know, like we were saying, you have to operate in reality. And so you got to operate in reality these days too. I think before we keep moving forward, we dive into the LF'n Wheel of Questions presented by Liquid Force.
The LF'n Wheel of Questions.
Okay, let's go.
So if you can go ahead and grab that down there, it's up on the top shelf. Liquid Force likes to make wakeboarding fun. It's kind of what we're talking about right now. So let's make this podcast a little bit more fun by spinning the LF'n wheel of questions. So we've got a couple classics on here. We got GOAT, Steal a Trick. I've got Worst Trend. You could probably just say, oh, come on, man, if you want to put that one in there. We got Steal a Trick and then Top 3. So,
oh boy. All right.
Yeah, go ahead and give that a rip. GOAT.
This is really tricky for me because I feel like the way that I look at professional wakeboarders, I see it from a more of an industry thing. You know what I mean? Like I see impact more than just skill set.
You're a numbers guy. You're an ROI guy.
Yeah, it's tough. Business all the time in Excel. You kind of see it differently. I think it's really, really tough for me, but I would probably say, from my experience at least, I think what Sean Murray has done is really, really massive for the sport because he's captivated such an amazing audience of people that are now still in the sport and that he still interacts and engage with. So he's basically continually to progress our sport. And again, as an athlete, incredibly good. I will also say, I think the other one that I would like to mention is I think Daniel Grant was just a monster of an athlete. Like that was when I was kind of really getting into it and what he was doing on both cable and wake skate. And that's also one where I point back to like how, and is one that if they had almost more of a solidified opportunity, I know Daniel, with Liquid Force and everything like that, but I'd be curious, like if it was, because again, when Sean Murray, it was a completely different game. If you're top dog,
if you got in a little bit at the beginning, you got solidified money. You can now you got a career now.
So that's the hard part is what does the GOAT scene look like if it was kind of back there? I think another one, watching them both grow up and ride, I think Trent and Gavin, they're very, very young, but the stuff that they're already doing in their mindset and their approach, it's really hard because I know there's probably some 12 or 13-year-old out there or maybe in Europe that I don't really know about.
Nope. Trent Stuckey is the best in the world.
I mean, right now,
and Gavin's number 2.
And so my thing is just knowing them and the way they approach wakeboarding, and more importantly, the way that Jason and Shannon have kind of taught them. I just think they're going to have longevity.
They're still young too.
So that's the hard part. Where when I look at all of those elements when it comes to GOAT, it's really, really tricky for me to kind of point to one thing. I think another one that's a sneaky one, John Dreiling, just because of all the stuff that he's doing with the sport. Now, again, people are probably getting crazy, like, contests or videos or parts, all that stuff.
Yeah.
I'm looking at it slightly differently. I'm looking at what
this is
doing.
A good, different opinion.
And again, just all of the things he's doing now with the WWA, with the USA Wake Park League, again, just constantly being part of it. And, one thing I do want to give a shout out to John and, back to inclusive and kind of, how kids can be kids. Man, John had to go through a lot at OWC. Like, 13-year-old, and I do have a fun story. He was our D rider for the Collegiate. So the first time I met John, he was a boat rider. So he was a boat rider, and we're like, hey, we're doing this wakeboarding club. He's like, I'm 15, but I'm in college somehow. So we're like, okay, well, that counts.
Because he's got a big brain on that.
Yeah, he's a smart dude. So
got an MIT. And
again, that's why you got to try and keep them, in the industry because they'll be beneficial there. But so many people were like, oh, he's got no style. He's such a cool, it was brutal. And he would just show up every day and he'd be like, nope, I'm going to keep doing it. Like every single day he would just show up and do the thing. And that level of grind, especially now, I feel like when there's not as many opportunities, to me is amazing. And I'm forecasting out many, many years when it comes to who I think the greatest is. Cause I still think wakeboarding is so in its infancy that it's really tricky for us to say, yep, that was it. They're the best.
Yeah.
But those would kind of be if I had to pick a grouping of them based on the different reasons there. But yeah, that's a tricky one. I was probably, when I looked at that, I was like, not GOAT.
Who you got on the ladies' side?
Dallas Friday is a really big one. I mean, Megan Ethel, she was fun. She was actually a summer camp counselor with me. But seeing her approach to kind of boat and cable, it's really tricky. Like I wish I could almost kind of put them all in the same era of wakeboarding because it's created different trends there. And another one, a sneaky one, that the younger one, Campbell Scarborough, I knew her growing, again, she was a rider at OWC for a long time there. My favorite thing with that is when I saw her riding, there was a point where I basically was like, she's going to be world champion. And she was pretty still developing, but you can see it.
You can see with the power that people ride with. People ride, some people ride kind of gentle and dainty, and it's that's not going to get you to land a bunch of new tricks. But if you see someone ride with power and authority, it's oh, Like early on, for
Exactly.
sure. Like if they do that early on.
Well, they're just like, you're not supposed to be the stylish, like learn, like you're just almost like, you're not supposed to be.
Just learn the freaking tricks
Yeah,
first. Right?
stop it. You know, I'm seeing all those kids. And you know, a fun story quick with Trent growing up there. I got robbed in a contest at OWC. Yeah, I'm honestly very, very upset about it.
Did you protest?
I don't think we had the means to it. They just told you to leave.
You should have gone for video review.
I know, I really should have, honestly. But basically, me and Trent, advanced division. So you had Trent go through it, and then you had Gavin go through it. So like all the adult guys are just like, oh, here comes this 9-year-old. But again, super cool kid. You know, it was never like he was like arrogant or anything like that.
Yeah.
He's just Trent being Trent, having a good time. But I landed a 7 in contest, and like probably in one hand, I can count the amount of 7s.
What seven are we talking?
Heel front side.
Oh, heel front 7. Okay.
I can't do the toe side backside one that all the kids
It's
do
the
nowadays.
easiest one, dude. I'm telling you.
I know, and I try, and I can't do that.
Once you
pull
figured it out, you would. But okay, heel front 7. Okay.
So heel front 7. I've landed 2 9s. That's actually, and my favorite part was one of the 9s. I was like, hey, can you film this? And
You got on.
well, I was like, I'm feeling good, and like the approach is off the dock. So I'm like, here we go. Like, can you film this? So I go off the dock, bolts. Like literally one of the clean. I just remember riding around, I'm like, so good. It's like, I thought you were gonna take a lap. So shout out to Sean Rysack for that one. So I
know what they say, footy or it's fiction.
I know.
So it didn't happen.
Yeah, exactly. So might as well. I should have said it was a 12, and then he's got another few spins on there. But anyways, he landed a 7. I landed a 7. His 7 was sloppy, but I mean,
Well, he probably pre-spun it because he's like 14 pounds.
well, so here's the fun part with them. What I was saying with like when Trent and Gavin were riding for the first 2-3 years, they didn't even go off of Excel completely. They just went off of the corner and did like 180, back 1, 3, like off the corner of it.
Yeah.
And they did that for 2-3 years, I would say. And they just got incredibly good at every single spin, and they did not flip. And then one day they flipped, and now they have 8 spins or 8 flips in like one day. So like kids, do your fundamentals. Like they are the definition of that, because you literally see them riding and working on those little baby things there. So to kind of go back to the GOAT, I would say Dallas Friday from kind of the similar era. Then I would say Megan Ethel, just again, you know, because boat and cable was real. I think boat and cable, she's one of the rare riders that you really, I mean, Jamie Lopina, you saw it a lot too, but like I would say Megan, and then the newer generation, like I said, with Trent and Gavin, I think Campbell River Hendricks, though, like these, their level of riding, I always feel so bad for extreme sports athletes, because I feel like, again, you're playing football, but every year you got 10 more yards to go, and the defense only gets better. So, you know, huge shout out to any of them, but I think we're going to see a lot of potential for it just in the upcoming decades.
Yeah, for sure. And we'll get into that in a little bit, because I think that'll be a good conversation to have. But we got a LF'n wild card. So this is a little bonus question from the guys at Liquid Force, and they want to know what your favorite wake film of all time is.
Oh, you know, I knew this was going to be a question, because I'm like, what's the wake film? I'm like, all right, who's brushing up there? 100% Reach. Have you ever seen Reach?
I have not.
Okay, and I don't think a lot of people have, because it's kind of a little bit more, you know, it's a Ski Rixen movie with like Ski Rixen riders, but it has Daniel Grant in it too. So and it has Tom Fouché. So Jeff Fagine from Ski Rixen, he was like a videographer. And again, these are the people where, you know, he wakeboarded too, but again, he got really good at videography. Like, be nice to the people on the fringes, guys, because they have really good skill sets that really help us out a lot. So like, it is great when you have someone who knows, you know, oh, I might not be the best wakeboarder, and, you know, all my whole focus is wakeboarding. And I'd say I'm 100%, like, I knew I was going to be a pro. So I was like, let me teach and let me try and be part of the business. But Reach is such a good film. I mean, I think people are going to watch it now and might be like, oh, whoa, it's definitely 2012 style. You're going to see baggy pants, and you're going to see a lot of spinning there. But it's just so much fun. And it's like the people like Mark Schuster and Diego Shaw, Tom Fouché, Nick Davies,
I mean, those are some
Daniel
names.
Grant.
Those are some names.
But it was all like people who like were at Ski Rixen. So
Yeah.
it was so cool seeing it put together. And like, I don't know if it's nostalgia
Oh,
or what,
it
but
could be,
it's,
yeah.
I watched it again today. And I was
Oh,
like,
you did?
I did.
Okay.
I was like, oh, it's so good. It's so much fun. So if anyone hasn't seen it, I would highly recommend you go take a look
Is
at
it
it.
on YouTube?
Vimeo.
Vimeo. Okay,
Yeah,
I'll
so,
throw the link in the show
I'd say
notes.
take a look at it, but I mean, it's so cool again. And shout out to all the videographers and photographers for capturing the sport. Because again, I feel like a lot of them are doing it very passion-wise.
Yeah.
And it's huge. There's so much riding out there that's gone, in the sense of like, if no one's there to capture it, you know.
Yeah, didn't exist basically. That's a good one. I would not have. I haven't seen that one. I'll have to give that one a watch. So we can put the LF and wheel questions back. Thank you to Liquid Force for that. I think we move into some more cable park specific stuff. So you guys operate year round, both Miami Water Sports Complex and Orlando Water Sports Complex. I'm curious if you think it would be a benefit or even logistically feasible to close the park down for X amount of time in the off season.
I really wish I could show you how much time and debate and like data we look into to make this question. Like, this is something where like it is always like, okay, where are we at? Where we've landed is it depends on the weather, which is literally the worst thing ever to like have as a metric, you know, like
because you can't. There's nothing you can do about it.
Yeah, you're like, what do? You just want. And honestly, this job is like half part-time weatherman, where I'm just like looking like, are we gonna get a week? Like, we had some months where in February we had it rain from Friday to Sunday, like completely rain the entire. And I'm like, where did this come from? Like, and you know, I need all of the weekends to be good, realistically. Yeah. So the hard part is it comes down to, you know, what are the benefits we're getting out of it, and what are we losing from it, and what's kind of that daily amount of like business wise. And what we ended up siding on with that is, if we have better weather, it's good because we do actually get a lot of people traveling for the parks. You know, obviously we could say, hey, we're closed this time, and then maybe it'll focus people on the different time there, but we still get a lot of people. We get a ton of Canadians at OWC on the Aqua Park, which is always great to see. And we get a lot of camps too during the off season.
Interesting.
So we'll get a lot of the Northerners where they're like, yeah, I want to get on the water.
Take a week vacation.
Yeah.
Warm
So
spot
it's like, if we have good weather, totally worth it. If we don't have good weather, not worth it. So where we've landed is, it's better. And plus, it's kind of hard for the staff too. You know, like, hey guys, like, we're going to take 2 months off, or we're going to take a month off, or like it. Again, I wish we could like easy hours and hours and hours of us just sitting there and like what we even like we had a number and we're like, well, what's this? And then it's really tricky there. But I would say that is one of the benefits of the park, and one of the benefits to wakeboarding in general. I mean, like anytime I go snowboarding, anytime I go surfing, I think it's just the amount of time you're on the water at a cable park. Like, you get your wristband, you get on the water, and you can just ride and like chairlift or getting out to the surf.
Yeah, I think this opens another conversation point that I agree with you on is people say cable passes are expensive, and sometimes they are, you know, overpriced, I think, at some parks. But for the most part, the value you're getting per hour or minute compared to other activities, I mean, you could say skiing and snowboarding is more fun. Like, it's a more enjoyable activity because you're on a mountain or whatever. But like, if you kind of remove all that from the equation, you're just like, how much time am I spending on the board itself? At a cable park, if you get a season pass, you are going to spend more time on the water than anybody ever would, like on a snowboard, because half the time you're snowboarding, you're on a chairlift.
100%.
The whole time you're wakeboarding, like, you know. So that's an interesting one. So would you say you guys, if the weather's bad, like, you would lose money for a little bit in the off season there?
It all depends. Like, if you gave me a perfect forecast of what the weather was going to be, I could literally tell you, like, okay, these days, this one right here. So that's the hard part with it. But again, the way that we look at it too is, you know, the members are huge when it comes to, especially in the off season, you know, and having that there. And, you know, if you get someone who is riding in the winter, they're going to be a customer in the summer. So tough question. And the hard part with this is everyone's a tough question to some degree.
I liked it better in the winter than in the summer, to be honest, but that's probably my Midwest roots where it's a little too hot here.
A little too cold for me. I mean, you know, I might check out Driftline, I think.
Well, here, let's just dive into Driftline. So, Driftline makes wetsuit line board shorts, so they keep you warm in the winter if you're riding OWC. I wear them all the time, and use code GRAB15 for 15% off your order. Best boardies in the game. And this is just a Deserve Some Love segment. So anybody in your life, whether it's rider, coworker, you know, anybody that deserves a little bit of shine, maybe didn't get the love they deserved.
Oh, 100%. And I shout out to Driftline again for supporting the pod. And
Absolutely.
Because of this, it gave me time to think about this question. So I'm like,
love that.
I know this one's coming. The wheel, I was like, as long as I don't get good, I'm good. Immediately got it. I did want to steal some tricks, because I was going to say I wanted to steal Nick Davies' air tricks, which would probably be super controversial. Because, like,
well, he has like all of them. I mean, back in the day,
it's not even how he has them. They just look so much fun. Like, it's so effortless. Like, he's just.
You ever seen the debut?
Yeah.
Okay, that his, like, I don't know what park it was, but it's like a million air tricks in a row where it's just like boop, 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 boop. And
like, that's the stuff on camera. Like, you watch him free ride, and it's just like, no one's having more fun, at least from when I was watching. So I was like, that'll be a cool one. But to deserve some love, I actually have 3. I know I'm going over.
Dude, you could go 10 if you want.
So everyone deserves love. I have a giant list right here. Number 1 is going to be anyone in the wake park industry. Like anyone working for cable in the water sports industry, doing anything, whatever it might be, anyone doing anything in this industry, I think deserves a ton of love. As we were kind of mentioning, it's really a passion thing, and it's hard work. It's incredibly hard work, and they do it because they love it. So I know sometimes riders can be like, oh, this operator is no fun, or, oh, this park's no, like, ugh. The only reason that park and that person is there is because they're passionate about what you're doing. So I think they 100% really do deserve a lot of love. Number 2, wake moms. So I was going to say the big one that I always see is usually when it's behind boat, oh, my dad would take me out there. When it's on cable, my case story there too, it was my mom that was bringing me out there. And I can tell you firsthand how amazing these moms are for bringing their kids out. My mom was doing work in the hot sun on the bleachers just so I, again, could go fall in the corner there. Absolutely amazing. I see it all the time at the parks. So if you're listening to this and you're a wakeboarder and your mom brought you to go call her right now or turn to her right now and you say, thank you so much. Because again, that is huge. Like if we pulled wake moms away from the industry, we'd be in dire straits. So they are absolutely amazing. And then the third one, as I was kind of mentioning before, it's just any rider who's kind of on the fringe. I think the hard part with cable parks is you get notoriety for being good. You know what I mean? If you're really good at the park, you're going to get noticed. If you're a pro wakeboarder, you're going to get noticed. But it's the people who don't have, and a lot of times is they just don't have the opportunity to go pro. Like even at a cable park, when I was growing up at Ski Rixen, I got to go once, maybe twice a month. If you're going to the park every single day, how am I supposed to even come close to what you're doing? So I think if you have that awareness as a rider and you just understand that the more people we have in the industry would be more beneficial, then that is it. So again, if they can't do a trick or if they're kind of ZT or whatnot, like show them the love too and be like, we want you to be part of this because it's going to happen in anything. There's always a cool kids club. And I mean, I would say I fit in with my college team pretty well. I worked at OWC, but once I become director of operations for Aktion, now everyone's like, oh, hey, wow. So you got to understand that if you don't give someone enough time in the industry, they might not ever have that opportunity to progress. And again, John's a massive example of that, like just from how much he's stuck around to where now how he's gotten in. I mean, just rider of the year was so cool. Like so many cool things happen and you might never know who that rider might be that if you don't give them a little extra love, and that just includes everyone at the cable. So everyone at the cable deserves more love.
I love that. That's a good answer. Thank you to Driftline for that. So yeah, if you're in the winter, you need I got an extra pair for you if you want to borrow a pair in the winter here. We go take a set. Take a set together. I
will say April and September are my favorite. If you get a good day and the water's slightly cool, that's like the prime. So like April, May, like August, September. Once it gets colder than that,
you're out.
Maybe November.
You're not down for a Christmas session.
I don't know. I'm like, let's just go to the gym. We'll do weight training for the off season. Like I'm an athlete.
So you're not a wetsuit guy then.
Not anymore. I mean, I
That's
was,
fair.
but then I'm just like, it's not worth it to me at some point.
It is a lot of effort. It makes a whole nother step to get.
I will say, I'm not a wetsuit, but I am don't fall. So I've done that a lot.
You could run that one all the time.
You just go ride. You just do super fundamentals just to make sure you're not super rusty, and then you get off. But yeah, no wetsuit. I'm like, oh, no way.
Can't even move. I mean, that's a tough one. I guess if you got a big one on. So why haven't American cable parks found more widespread success with aqua parks? I mean, I guess in recent history, they've kind of been going into it, I guess. But up until recently, I feel like there were a lot of cable parks that are just strictly cable parks. And why do you think, more haven't leaned into the aqua park thing? I guess more are now, but.
I mean, I think it's tough, and I'm really excited when we talk about the ideal cable park, kind of that we mentioned there. Because I think it's a hard metric to do. And like, if we knew everything that we knew right now about the industry, the park would look completely different. You know what I mean? Like if it continued to progress, because you have to understand, like all of the assumptions in business, it's not like, you're operational and you knew what it's going to be like. You have to go through that process. So I think what happened is a lot of people weren't either set up for the aqua park. Because I mean, if you look at where the aqua park has a lot of success, it's like touristy places. Like they just throw them on an already popular environment. It's a very easy thing to use. I would say, OWC, we were really set up for it. And we did have a park in Miami, but unfortunately the way the restrictions that we had being in a public park, it didn't make sense for us, which was pretty brutal just because basically like I love all of my ads are typically with the aqua park at first, just because people will click on that way more than they'll click on
It's
anything.
most relatable. They understand it.
And this is a little thing like water park. And I if you've listened to me as any other like cable park owner, and you know, we get together every once in a while and we kind of discuss, I'm always like, you got to call it a water park. When I look at our Google like searches, hypothetically, we have 10,000, you know, people that saw us, 9,000 are coming from water park. And then the rest are coming from every other action, like wakeboard, wake surf, boat wakeboard. Like that is how you tap into the general public. And then if the general public sees a cable park, then they kind of get an understanding of it, and then you can kind of retarget to them. But I think the hard part is a lot of the cable parks are throwing in an aqua park versus how do you have the aqua park fit with the business model before we build the park versus after. And I think that's the hard part with it is, you know, I think it is a net benefit for a lot of parks, but realistically it kind of comes down to like how the park is designed to a lot. You know, if it's a very strictly, you know, cable wakeboard park, which I think we've seen, you know, out there, it's not going to do as well as, again, you know, one of the big things that we had is, you probably weren't even here, we had the aqua park in the corner for a little bit. So yeah, but one of the main reason why we have the beach and the new docks and everything there is so that we could bring the aqua park and put it front and center. That was the main reason there, because we were basically losing a ton of our customers to drive all the way out to the corner. So I think that's like the perfect example of the business changed, and it's just parks trying to keep up with it.
Yeah, definitely. I'm curious on, now that you guys have done this, you know, redo, I guess, and I think OWC it looks really good in terms of the setup. I mean, the only other thing I would say would be perfect is if you have the beginner dock right next to the advanced dock, but that's just unrealistic for what you guys have there with the aqua park in the middle. What is the split between, you know, aqua park sales and cable park ticket sales, I guess?
It's really tricky to, I mean, like we do have like the numbers for it, but the thing is like, what's the bleed effect? You know, who found us from aqua park and then went to wakeboarding?
Yeah.
I will say that wakeboarding still leads it.
Really?
Again, yeah, you know, people might look at it and be like, oh, it's just aqua park. Nope, wakeboarding still, and the bread and butter really is the standard cable. I mean, it really, really is the driving factor for, I would say, cable parks is the beginner trying it for the first time and kind of getting into it. In the summer, you know, it's a lot closer, but like, you know, just rough numbers, I'd say like 20-30% is kind of what you're looking at. Each park's different though.
Yeah.
Like I could for sure have a park where they're doing 70% on the aqua park and 30%. But for OWC's breakdown, that's kind of where we're at. But we're also, you know, very beneficial where we're at. I would say we got a lot of water friendly people. You know, that's one of the things that I think we experienced a little bit in South Florida.
More generation stuff too, because boat life has been the thing.
I mean, I think Central Florida is the best for it. So it's kind of hard. You know, a lot of people just accommodated with, you know, whether they have pools or they've been in the water or they've been in lakes. It's one of those things where that's a huge factor as well too. Because if you go to kind of the demographics who aren't familiar with water, you know, you could have the easiest aqua park ever, but the first barrier to them is just getting in the water.
Yeah, putting on a life jacket, getting wet. That's the biggest barrier. Do you think a cable park in America that only has one full-size cable can operate, you know, a profitable business?
Yes. I think I think any business can be profitable, which is the tough part, but it's always little things, in my opinion, that kind of pull it one way or the other. You know, insurance is always a massive one when it just comes to the cost like that. You just have to know what you're operating and what you're running. And again, the one I'd point to for that is Dan. You know, he does a fantastic job with the way he's utilizing the 2.0 systems. And I think it's just, you know, another big shout out. Have you been to the Cove yet after the recent one? Okay, so huge shout out to Josh out there.
Yeah.
And he's done a fantastic job. They're doing a fantastic job of kind of what I would say is what we were hunting too, which is kind of, again, the more family appeal of it. Like they have the cable and they have it. Because again, the goal is you get the parents in, you get the kids in, and the kids become wakeboarders. And now you have future wakeboarders. So like we really have to pitch that model there, but it looks fantastic. So I think you do have the capability for it. I do think it could be slightly harder. But I mean, again, it comes back to the factors like, you know, what's your lease? What's your utilities? What like that's the hard part that I feel like it comes down to is what are you actually paying as a business? Because there's different deals all over the place. You know, on the grand scale, I would say 2 cables would definitely be more ideal, but like you could easily pull it off with a single cable. You just have to understand what you're doing and you have to understand kind of the business element, which is not very easy. Because again, it's not like there's you're opening a Subway or opening a McDonald's. This is a completely different and new element of a business. So, you know, huge shout out again to the owners for putting it on the backs of just doing all that.
Yeah, no kidding. How close does a park have to be for it to be considered competition?
There's no such thing as competition. I will scream this from the top of it. I love it. And it was something that kind of came out because when I first started, like Nona was opening and like, oh, what's going to happen? I'm like, nope, this is it. The more people wakeboarding, the more wakeboarders we have. And there's no such thing as competition. I mean, I would even say like maybe competition over membership, but realistically,
does that move the needle that much?
Not really. I mean, on a little bit there, but here's the thing. You don't think the members are going to go to your park every once in a while? And if they don't have a membership and they pay for a day pass, you basically paid for a membership. You know, you're close to it when it comes to the prices. And that's really what we try and do. You know, we really try and say, hey, if you're here for, you know, one time or something like that, we do try and say, hey, you know, this is kind of where the costs are. Because again, you know, we know how we are raising our rates in that sense. And, you know, I feel exactly what you're saying where it's like, oh, the prices are going up and things like that. But we always want to have a path for the person that wants to ride here every day to make it affordable.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, $119 a month, like is our current membership rate. And I just feel like if you like, realistically, if you go twice a month, you're basically there. So
yeah, I'm on day 61 right now of that 119 a month, so I'm getting my value.
100%.
I'm milking that value.
I do have a fun little story. When we did shut down one of the cables, we had one of the pros was a little bit upset about it, which again, I get it. We're slowing down the cable, you know. And they were making a big deal about it on the dock. So then we brought him back and we're like, here, we're going to refund you for the day. You paid for a pro pass. So we're going to annualize that for a day. You're not allowed to go here. Here's your $1. And they got it. You know what I mean? And again, I get it because, again, you're a pro. You want to practice, you know, and now like, oh, that's wiped there. But like it goes back to what you were saying. Like I wish I could wakeboard as much as I could snowboard when it comes to like the time actually on the board riding. And that's the hard part. You know, there's just a lot of different variables when it comes to just how the operations are, and just each park is so unique. That's the hard part. Like I can barely, even OWC and Miami are almost like two different types of operations, just in the sense of what the demographics are, what the setup is. It's an interesting puzzle for any cable park owner. Absolutely.
And each cable park is its own interesting puzzle. There are some things that are intertwined, but it's your local community is very different than other local communities.
There's a perfect Frankenstein somewhere in the mix of what the operations are.
So there's a few parks in, you know, the Florida area. We got Miami Water Sports Complex, the Cove, OWC. There's several. Nona, has there ever been talks of like not an epic pass type situation, but like a discounted pass or like
all the time
anything?
It's
like
logistics is the hard part. Like, I mean, we have, you know, the park passes. So like for the additional $15 a month, you can go to Miami or you can go to OWC and ride as much. We very rarely, like a trip is what you'll kind of get. Now, again, 3 hours. So, you know, I could see, we've kind of talked with Nona a little bit about it, but like the hard part is just they have a different POS system. We have a different POS system. What are you going to do? Tracking Google Sheets? And like, is that really moving the needle for us? Like, that's the hard, like,
I mean, yeah, I get like, is it moving the needle? Maybe not, but like, I think it's more important from maybe more of like a community aspect, because I'm probably not going to go to Nona because I'm not going to go, you know, buy a full day pass. But if my season pass or monthly pass at OWC gets me 50% off, I'm probably going to go there a lot more because it's, you know, it's not such a financial like hit in the face. And I would imagine vice versa, the Nona kids would do this, the opposite or the same.
I 1,000% agree with you. It just comes down to, are you going to spend the time, the resources, the execution, making sure someone's on top? Like, these are the business things that happen for any business. And, you know, if we're all under the same umbrella, obviously it's much easier. And if one park is not checking the sheet or like in a perfect world, yes. Yeah. But it's just one of those things where like, are we really going to invest a lot of effort and time into kind of getting the system up for maybe 20 to 30 to 40, even 50, even if you want to go to like 100, you know, per year. But again, I think that just shows grow the base. You know what I mean? Like if you grew the base and the base was big enough like snowboarding, there would be some company like Epic that would come to all the cable parks and say, every one of you gets a cut. Here's how we manage the system. Here's how it works. And everyone's happy. Yeah. So like that's another example of that's just the base is big enough to support all of those. I mean, I love it. You know, I got mine renewed. Like, that's awesome. You get to go to so many different ones. So it has been talked about it. But again, I think a lot of the smaller ones, you're already so limited on time and resources that you got to focus on different areas. But great. I mean, that's the thing. Like, I think a lot of the things that the riders talk about, like we talk about too, like 100%. It's not like we're out there like,
implementation. Is the hard part,
it's implementation. It's all, there's a lot of just factors that like, it's really, really tough, but we're on the same page. You know what I mean?
I just wish it could happen because like I have my OWC pass. I'm really not going to go ride Nona all that much because I got to pay, but like, so they're not getting any money from me. Right. But if it was 50% off, now they're getting, 50% more money from me. Right? They're getting something rather than nothing, and so vice versa. So like,
I
if
agree.
it could be logistically implemented, it would be.
That's the thing. Like if there's it's really the different POS systems and waivers and stuff there. Because I mean, even like in Miami, it's kind of tough where it's like we have an Excel sheet that we share, and like if someone doesn't update the Excel sheet, which again, if you're kind of doing it and you miss that or something there, then you got to call the one park, and if they're busy, then you're down there, and like that's us, working at it. And again, there are systems for it potentially and things like that, but it's a lot of the logistics stuff, which I will say again, riders and operators are typically actually kind of close to what we want. It's easy. Like it's really easy. The amount of great ideas.
Well, it's easy for me to come up with that.
Yeah.
idea
It's like, hey, you know what you guys need to do this. And I'd like it. And like, it's like, yeah, I agree. It's totally great. It's just the hard part is actually doing it.
Because I feel like no cable parks ever that I've seen do this, like physical season pass cards, like an ID that you take a photo on. Is there a reason nobody's done that?
No, that's kind of cool. I like that. But we talked about like RFD bands for like a little bit and like a special wristband, but then they lose it all the time. And realistically, they lose the card. So it would be a cool souvenir type thing.
Well, yeah, I just like always think of like little things like when I was growing up, like, or for our Alpine team in college, like you see who can get the goofiest, photo and like you share it. It's like all that stuff. But like, I don't know. Just because like when I check in at OWC, I just say my name, but I could also just like hand over the card. They'd see the name, scan it, whatever. I don't know.
No, again,
stupid ideas, but
no, I don't think it's stupid. I think it's again, once you scale it up, it makes a ton more sense.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
sure.
Like that's the big thing that like at the Alpines, like they need to have cards.
That's the only way they can keep track.
That's
of
what I'm saying.
Stuff.
Like you cannot go up there and be like, hey, it's Hunter. They're like, hey, Hunter.
You've been here every day for the past 2 months, and I still have no idea who
exactly.
you are.
Like there's thousands of people. Whereas for us, it's like, so I think that it's exactly that.
Yeah.
Like good idea, but. And is it there?
We'll get into kind of like those things could be implemented in, you've got a big energetic vision of the future of wakeboarding, and I do as well. I think we kind of share this, and we'll dive into that in a little bit in the future. And I think that's when some of these things would come into play where it's like, visiting different parks with discounted passes or anything like that, where you're going to see more resemblance of like a snowboard ski resort type situation. Got a couple more here. So this is a broad one, but what are some of the biggest issues you've seen cable parks face in America?
I think the biggest one is as you grow as an industry, you get more support within the industry from just different manufacturers, different brands and things like that. It's like when times are good and, people are growing, it's beneficial for everyone. So, it makes more sense to invest in a cable park. Like a good way to put it is, a lot of board brands were a lot more active, super thankful for our sponsorship with Hyperlight and with Nautique in the sense of, providing that. But again, if you're able to show a larger growth of that adds more opportunities for people to kind of solidify the industry. And I think it has a ton of different benefits. Like one of those, as I just mentioned, is kind of like sponsorship of people being like, oh, wow, I'm familiar with what a cable park is. Here's one right here. Here's kind of how the process it works. On the other side is, the industry is all over the place with what we are. So for instance, in Florida, we're part of the Fair Rides Act. So we're an amusement park, which going through COVID and having to go through the same process that Disney World had to go through was pretty strenuous because, again, we're the cable is technically a roller coaster in the eyes of Florida. In North Carolina, it's technically under the Department of Transportation because it's a transportation device similar to a chairlift. So how do you go to an insurance company and you say, hey, here's what we are, and there's not as much solidification of it. There's not yes, we have the WSIA and they do an absolutely, great job for essentially where we're at. But the hard part is you get a benefit from mass. And I really think what ends up happening is within this industry, we're seeing the issues with it pulling back. But again, I think it's a very fixable industry because again, if you do, provide this service and find a way to scale it, then you start getting the benefits. But I think that's just the hardest part is like, there is no, essentially for the most part, it'd be very hard for you to find another business that is almost kind of a little bit smaller and more niche than a cable wakeboard park.
Yeah.
Like I'm sure they exist. You know what I mean? I'm not saying that some
There's
guys.
a reason we don't know of them.
Yeah, some guys got some crazy business out there that we've never heard about. But for the most part, any of those industries are like escape rooms is, for instance, like let's just say that. I guarantee you there's a whole bunch of things on escape rooms. This is an insurance company that does nothing but escape rooms. They give the best deals on escape rooms. You know, here's the operations for it. Here's a manufacturer that manufactures the best escape room. Like all of those benefits you don't have.
Yeah.
Whereas when you're a cable park, and again, you know, Rixen and, you know, Sezitech, it behooves them more so to focus in Europe. It just does, you know, if and that's not, it's every business. Every business is going to follow what's best for their business. And if it's tougher in the States and there are not as many cables in the States, who do you think is going to get more attention and focus and, you know, more provided to it? Now, not to say the people who are, you know, again, John with Unit and, you know, Pat and everything, like there are people who are working really hard over here for it, but it's one of those things where scale is just going to benefit everyone. And I think the hardest issue that we have is being so few. It's really, really tough for us to have that collective power that other businesses have, which can be super beneficial in so many different ways.
Yeah, and we're kind of teasing it, but like we'll get into the future in a little bit, but it's almost like a hurdle we need to get over of like a certain threshold where it's like, okay, now we have this benefit of mass, or we're at this certain point.
There is a tipping point.
Yeah.
Like there legitimately is a tipping point somewhere out there. And again, I'm very, very confident because one of the, you know, toughest things for me is, I mean, like you look at our reviews and we're the highest rated water park in Orlando because again, our experience is so unique. Like I would say that when you have a experience at one of these parks and you get up for the first time, that is so much better than just crossing your arms and going down a slide. And that's the part that I'm eternally optimistic about.
We believe in the product. We believe in the product of wakeboarding.
We know.
Yeah.
You would not have a podcast if
Yeah.
you didn't enjoy or believe.
You're not going to have a podcast about sliding down a water slide, you know,
Yeah,
like
I wouldn't be here, you know,
Yeah.
like that's the difference of it is it's such a passionate element. And I think we will find a way to utilize it. And I mean, realistically, as things kind of go and we get more time, you know, a lot of things happen. I think the hurdle will get smaller.
Yeah.
But it's still, a big hurdle that any operator is going to face anytime you are essentially on the bleeding edge of a business.
Yeah, absolutely. So you mentioned Hyperlight. You're a Hyperlight sponsored park, I guess is the way to put that, or Hyperlight sponsors the park. Is there any is that a hindrance, I guess, in a sense, because can other board brands run demos at OWC?
No, so it's basically strictly with Hyperlight. The main one is really, again, our pro shop and kind of the product there, but really serving essentially as like the flagship for, you know, Hyperlight to be out there. I wouldn't really consider it too much of a hurdle, just simply because, I mean, you're not going to be an online retail if you really want to compete in that element there. And I'm very thankful to have the support of a brand more so than, you know, not having that support, but maybe having the, like, what are we going to do? Carry all of the board? Like that's because it does get brought up where it's like, oh, maybe we sold all of the boards. I'm like, where are we going to put the inventory? You know, and then how are you going to compete online? Like there's so many different ones there. So that is definitely a massive benefit, I would say. And another massive benefit, like, you know, I mentioned before, is the support of Nautique as well. It's just something where that gives us a massive benefit when it comes to just the experience we're able to provide. And again, that's, you know, ideally, as you scale more, then you would get more people within the industry to then support things that are growing the industry. So it's that circle that just keeps turning if you get it going.
Yeah. So you kind of touched on why Nautique is supporting the park and continuing to like have them be around. Like, cause like if they wanted to, they could say, you know, we were not interested in this anymore. Like, you know, we don't need this anymore if we don't want to do this. But obviously they want to continue to get more people on to wakeboards, like you alluded to. And Aktion Water Sports, I think, had the same philosophy of, we just got to get people in bindings on skipping across the water with a handle in their hand. Who knows in the next 20 years of their life if they're going to become an engineer and be able to buy a boat, you know, or whatever. So like that's the goal and idea. Is that kind of congruent with what you talk to them about? And they're like, that's their vision, is to just get as many people on the water, and cable's another way to do so.
Exactly that. I mean, and I look at myself, you know, I've never had a boat growing up. You know, I've had friends with boats, which is great. But like, if I have that ability now, then I'm 100% going to get a boat, and being around Nautique boats, you know, it's really something where that's going to be my decision easily. And we've had people who have had boat sets there and they've purchased boats. So, I mean, you can actually see, you know, the data play out. What I will say is another massive factor in this, because again, you know, for those of you who aren't familiar with Correct Craft is kind of, at first it was mainly Nautique, and then Correct Craft is now the holding company. Now they have multiple different businesses, and we're one of them. But one of the core elements of Correct Craft is really making life better. Bill Jurgen, the CEO, tremendous respect for him. I mean, again, not only is he incredibly intelligent when it comes to just the business, and the entire team there too. Like, the only reason I really do bring this up is I was a little bit thrown into the deep end. You know what I mean? Like, again, I go from tech sales to...
That's the water sports industry, though.
Yeah.
No matter what job you take, you're getting thrown in the deep end, I think.
But they've just been incredibly supportive of it. And, you know, a lot of times it might be like, oh, like, do they really... They 100% care. And I think one of the other elements is not only growing up and getting another generation, but one of the big core values that we have is making life better. And, you know, Bill himself will come out on the weekend and go ride, you know, because he enjoys being on there. You know, I'm pretty sure you mentioned at one point Blue Mind. Was that on the podcast?
Yeah, Kevco.
Yep, exactly. So Kevco, exactly what I was talking about. Which, shout out to Kevco. What an amazing guy. He helped out a lot when I first started. He's like, oh, here's what it's kind of like. And I'm like, okay, this is great. He gave me a little bit of the bearings. But, you know, we have 30,000 people between the two parks. And the thing that really keeps me driven is you can go to members and you will get, you know, my son got out of their shell. They're now happy. You know, they built friends. They've had this community. I have this job. I'm now sitting on a podcast. Like, all of these things come out of just what we operate and do. And it's not only just in the daily operations. Like, another big thing for Correct Craft is just the philanthropic. So, I mean, like, they were literally in North Carolina as a company-wide event with one of Parker Boats, which is out there, just rebuilding a homeless shelter. And and that's part of the core mission every year. We volunteer at local charities as well. So Clean the World's a big one for us. We work with Above the Wake, which are people who are on the autistic spectrum out on the water. We do with Angels, which is people who have just different, you know, disabilities that are getting on the water for adaptive ski. So it's not only is it creating more people to buy boats, they really do recognize the value of what it means to create these memories and make life better like that. And like, that is one of the big ones where, like, every once in a while I'll kind of, you know, oh, like, do they really care? And I will defend that to like, I'm the one in those conversations. Cause like you said, if it was something they were not interested in, the way business works is we're not interested.
Yeah.
You know, I can really tell you from the bottom of my heart, like, they really believe and we want to make it work. It's just the hard part is, again, when we started to where we're at now, the industry, extreme sports as a whole, a lot of things have shifted. But, you know, we're very committed firmly to the idea of it. And, you know, I think it is, like you said, that tipping point. So it's absolutely amazing to have that benefit. Because like I said, there are a ton of operators out there who don't have that benefit, who come up to the business decision and, you know, the only thing they're thinking about is the business. They're not thinking about making life better. They're not thinking about all of the other benefits that it can provide. And I just think that's incredibly lucky to where we're at. And the other thing is, it's good business. You know what I mean? Like, if you really focus on making life better, you're going to provide a really good experience.
Kind of go hand in hand.
Yeah, that's what, like, that's the really cool part is, like, when you have the culture correct, it kind of just grows from it. And I'm, again, like, you know, I've known a few CEOs, you know, some tech companies that have gone for, you know, high values. And I've just been really, really impressed with kind of the ability that people have at Correct Craft to kind of come together as a team and see the culture element of it. And if you are interested in this, I would say Education as CEO and then Making Life Better are two books that are just incredibly good about the insides of Correct Craft. It's really fascinating.
Oh, they're about Correct Craft.
Well, it's kind of, it's a book by Bill, but basically Making Life Better is the Correct Craft story. So 100% that one's all about, which is incredibly fascinating. And then the other one is Education as the CEO, which is just something where, like, I think if you want to be a good leader, that's one to just pick up. Because, again, being a leader is typically just being a learner and trying to help. And, you know, again, the other CEOs that I've seen have been very me, look at me and my thing. And if we were dealing with one of those, it'd be a much different situation. So, again, huge shout out to them, huge shout out to Nautique, to Hype, like, anyone in this industry, you know. And I know a lot of times some of the event tours will get a little bit of flack here and there. They're doing it all out of the passion. You know, there's so many other circumstances. No one wants to do that. No one wants to be the bearer of bad news and be like, hey, guess what? We're pulling back on or doing this. It's just, again, they're in it for a passion element, but business is always going to be there.
Yeah, definitely. I say we dive into, we were talking about it, we were teasing it. Now we're going to dive into it. What if you could build the ideal cable park? Let's say unlimited money, right? Let's say that's not on the table. Like, it doesn't matter. what would it look like?
I feel like every time you ask me one question, I come back, I'm like, I got 3 options for you.
Well, that's this one I kind of want options because it's good.
Well, I think the hard part is, you know, I mean, I've seen it in Europe, you know, in the sense of like models that really truly are working. And so I think that influences a lot. But there's always like questions that I have is like, is this version sustainable? So I'm going to outline really kind of the 3 ones that I see. And then I'll let you know which one I would do more so in the sense of like, I think I'd enjoy it the most. So I think number 1 is a very, very big water park that has a cable system with it. I think if you can get enough people into the water park where that is kind of the major driver of it, and I would term it as an active water park is what I would try. So I think BSR is almost kind of the closest version of this, or Waco Surf now. I think that's kind of the closer version of it that I would see, where you just have a ton of the amenities out there, but you reach such a volume at some point and all of the amenities support one another that daily ticket, essentially imagine a ski resort, but water sports. And I would say OWC is close to that, but imagine that to the 10x scale that like, you got to go big when it comes to something like that. So unlimited money, maybe that one. I would say that's a tougher one.
You just mean like a general admission ticket, and then you can do the cable, you can do the surf,
cable,
you can do the water slides.
You just go. I mean, probably there'd be like an upcharge for some of them.
Sure.
But like Aqua Park, Lazy River, water slide, you know, base package, wakeboard, a little bit bigger, surfing, you know. So I think, and that's kind of, I would say where we're trying to pivot with OWC, being in Orlando, being in all of that, is adding more of those amenities. So I would say you can go really, really big. But first off, I do also want to just quickly mention, like, I'm a firm believer that, like, if you can't really afford to dig the lake yourself, like, you probably don't have the, like, unfortunately, I think what happens with wakeboarding is a lot of people will dip their toes into it because they're so passionate about it. So it's like, let me find, like, what is the bare minimum that I need to open this park? And I think that's the hard part, but I totally get it because, you know, your other options not do it. So like realistically,
either make it happen or you don't.
Yeah. So it's not like you can't point at someone and be like, you didn't do it. Like I'd rather the person do something, but I think that's kind of where we run into a lot of the issues. Especially again, if you go into for extreme sports back in, 2005 or 2010, different market now. So you can kind of get trapped in that, but I think that's the grander one. I think the one that I'm a lot more positive about right now is the development park. Essentially, it is part of a residential complex, or it is part of some community, or potentially with the government as well. I mean, there's been some more positive reaction again for what we offer. It is clean, it is outdoor, it is fun, it is good for the citizens.
It's electric.
It is 100%. Like that's $25 a day. That's pretty affordable to run a cable system. So it's really one of those things where I see that being one that's really big. And I also see, personally for me, I think one that would be really cool is almost more like a country club. So like you really treat it as a fitness element. And the idea behind it would be, again, obviously a nicer neighborhood probably, but it would be something where you have a gym, you have a cycle studio or like a sauna or like a hot yoga studio or something like that. And then you have the park. And now the entire family can go there, get their physical fitness in, and then, have a great time. And basically I see that if you really go hyper fitness, which I think is possible. Like I really do think you can make people see wakeboarding almost as an Orange Theory or a, cycle studio or a yoga studio, which I'm sure, again, a lot of people are like, oh, that's not cool. Doesn't matter. You want as many people doing it as possible, and then it will get better, and then you will have the pros and so on.
Well, and if you have, continue after this, but if you have these parks that are like, yes, this would be a very kooky park. That if you were to describe it, it would be the kookiest park in the world. But the more kooky parks you have, the more opportunity you have for parks like Elevated or Valdosta to exist because you have a bigger base.
1,000,000%. And again, I always say there's like a spectrum of park. And I love Valdosta. Like I really do. And Elevated is amazing. Haven't been there yet. Totally on the list though. But it is that case. And really, again, you want the biggest base because then it gives you flexibility. It gives you the ability to have those parks. So I would say a fitness one, I feel like, again, if it was within the right community and it was focused on fitness, I think that would actually do really, really well. And again, there's a lot of developers now who are looking at this and they're saying, well, how do I justify X more on this housing? Well, I can say, hey, there's a surf pool, there's a cable park, there's all of these benefits. And I actually do think we might see a shift in like housing to like more of a rental type thing, but it's like, it's a rental community.
Weird dystopian, utopian future that we're living
Yeah,
in
no,
here.
it is kind of sad in
yeah.
that sense. But like, again, that's the business model. And one of the payoffs is
Yeah.
you have a cable park for your family and a fitness one. So
Well,
like,
how's your day-to-day life? It might be better
Yeah,
because you have all these things.
that's the
Yeah.
thing. So that's the hard part to it. And again, that would make sense for them. That would make sense for the community if they were essentially getting a revenue out of the house existing that would then support the benefit of it. So that's like one that I kind of have that. I think the one that if I had to, you say, hey, what are we going to do right now immediately? I would have a nice aqua park. I'd have 2 cable systems. And then the biggest thing is I would really, really, really focus on having a good restaurant. And obviously that's way harder to do than say like, just put the best restaurant there.
The restaurant industry is like,
No, everyone who's in the restaurant industry is just like, good luck. Now you're combining 2 of those. But the hard part with the restaurant industry is how do you differentiate which restaurant you're going to go to when there's a whole bunch of restaurants on the same street? When you're going to the park, because the cable and the aqua park can be at a discount as not necessarily a revenue leader, but the restaurant itself can then have higher margins because you're in a bathing suit with your family. I think that's the driver. And I would honestly say that's what I see a lot in the European parks is that they focus on something that does have margins. And the biggest thing is if you're a family and, only 2 of you are going to ride, all of you can still eat food. So that's a big element is every single person can then have something to essentially do. And I think it just makes for a really fun day. If you just think about it as, hey, let's go grab some food, drop the kids off, they can go on the aqua park for a little bit and then we eat our food, we chat. And I mean, waterside food is great. Like I love whether it's the lake, the ocean, whatever, like I think that model works there. I think the hard part is a standalone cable system, even just like even with 2 cables or just a standalone one, I think you need to wrap it into something else that then either generates more revenue or generates more people and interest in it. So, one, the giant wake park, you get more people, so then they'll translate to it. The other one, the restaurant side, you'll get more people to just go to the restaurant. And again, that's what I feel like now, 5 years from now, it might be like, oh, you got to do this, or 10 years. That's the hard part is it always does shift. Yeah. But what I am very, very optimistic about is this is the most accessible sport there is, in my opinion, boarding wise. I've done skateboarding. I've done skateboarding. I fell weird on my ankle doing a kickflip and I was hurt to walk for 3 weeks. Snowboarding, I caught my back edge doing a little back one by the chairlift area and it still hurts. Surfing, it's such a nightmare for me to just get out there and I'm like, okay, now it's time to enjoy this. Wakeboarding is so accessible. And not only just in the sense of getting on the water, but also if you see with the adaptive element that we have too, it is such a friendly sport to get into that if we do find a way to get this model, I don't see it not being the most popular sport. And here's the thing, it will get very kooky. Like you said, you will have pop-up parks and people will go there and be like, oh, look at all these guys just riding around, not even doing tricks and whatever,
His helmet's yellow and his vest as well.
Yeah, look at him smiling. How dare he? This isn't fun. But again, you have to look at it as that is the step to then make it so for the pros who are pushing the sport, that is just so much better for you. And again, that would make sense. If I had, and again, that's the vision for Action. That's what we're still working towards in the sense of figuring out the correct model. If we have multiple parks, that's when we get product that scales. If you had 50 parks, you don't think it would make sense for you to host the best event with all of the pros? It would be a no-brainer.
Yeah.
If you have a single park, is that going to move the needle for you? And that's, I think, the issue of scale that we kind of face as parks. But yeah, I think any of those ideas, I'd also say, I'm always happy to talk. So I've talked to pretty much any of the owners out there and operators. And, if you're curious about parks in general, potentially investors or anything like that, feel free to reach out to us. Again, we partner with a lot of different people and things like that. And it's just, once you figure out the beneficial model when it comes to again, just really being able to scale it, everything else is going to just fall into place. So I'm confident it's going to happen. We're going to continue to push at it on our end, but I really do believe that you were kind of mentioning it. There's going to be kind of a
second renaissance.
Yeah, second renaissance. I really do agree with it. I think, again, marketing dollars pulled out, boat dollars pulled out to some degree, which again, you can't blame them. They're following what's selling. That's their job. How dare you be good at your job is essentially what you're saying. I think once that plateaus, it's going to give a really big base. And one thing we were talking about, kind of like with the GOAT wheel and everything, I do still think, while there are so many legends in this sport and everything they've done and everything that we've documented, I really still think that there are so many people out there right now who are just barely getting up on the water riding now, who are just being part of it, who are going to play such a massive role in the wakeboard industry. And I think time's on our side. We got generations. I know a ton of people who are in Knights Wake now are having their first kids, and they're like, I can't wait to get them on the water. So like we're growing. I don't want to be the bearer of bad news of like, yeah, extreme sports are pulling back, is wakeboarding, all that stuff. We just need time. And I think, again, time is on our side. And I think the biggest thing is we have a good product. We know how good it is. Everyone listening to this knows how much fun it is to wakeboard. I can't see anyone who does not have fun wakeboarding, listening. Like that's,
if you get up and ride around, it's fun. It's fun.
And it beats any experience that you will view on TikTok or Instagram, or it will beat it. Now, in the instant second that you get it, will you feel a little bit better because you didn't have to fall? Yeah, but when you do get up and when you do land a ramp and when you do actually, achieve something that you had to work towards, it's night and day. And that is something that whether it's, the kids themselves getting pushed back or if the parents just like, enough is enough. Like that's my favorite is for summer camp. They're like, I just want them off the phone. It's like, all right.
And that's what we were talking earlier off camera, where it's like the pendulum, is going to have to swing at a certain point because either the kids are going to want to get off their phone because they're like, it's the cool thing to do because it's like all my friends are on their phones. Like this is whack. Or it's the parents that are like, all right, we've had enough of this shit. Like we got to cut this out. Like they got to go do real things in real life. So like, I think we're maybe at like, I'm hoping the peak of like obsessive technology, and maybe I'm totally wrong and we're all going to be wearing the goggles and never going to talk to anybody ever again. That could very well be the case too, but I'm hoping that it does swing a little bit back in the sense of like, we're going to do real things again.
Yeah, I think there's a case for it. And I mean, another thing is like realistically, as the industry progresses, then like I said, insurance companies become more familiar with what we offer, more standards come about. Like there's a lot of massive benefits from just all of the cable parks. Every single day the sun comes up operating.
Yeah.
Like it is stacking. And I know, again, with us shutting down ECP and some other parks closing, it can be kind of demoralizing for that. But those are still people who are wakeboarders. Every one of those members out at ECP, they ride. They're going to ride. If there's a park that pops up, they're going to get right back to riding.
Yeah.
And I think that's the thing that we really look at is every single year we are creating so many more people that could potentially continue doing it. And at some point you will have that tipping, in my opinion.
Yeah. And I'm curious to talk about that tipping point, but before we go more positives, we do have to hit some negatives. Before the podcast, we were talking about, you had some numbers on, search results or searches for wakeboarding. And I think it'd be a good thing to hear just some real numbers.
It's tough. And it's one of my least favorite slides to have. But it kind of goes back to what I say is I think extreme sports in general is pulling back. If you look at the trend for all of the sports, skateboarding, snowboarding, surfing, they all pull back in the same way. Because there was this glorious time where ad companies were like, let's just bombard people with extreme sports because that's how we sell our products. And it was great. I mean, honestly, that was, that was the high point of extreme sports. And I feel like because wakeboarding, again, was so quick to come up and, was a little bit more in its infancy, we're experiencing it just a little bit more. And the big result that I'm looking at is you can do Google Trends. So you can just search Google terms. Since 2005, to now, we are down at 92% as a search term, which basically means it was, 9 times higher when it comes to the amount of people looking to just searching it. So again, the data is not exact. It's not telling me how many people are on the water, things like that, but it just shows you the general interest. And not only that, but since 2016, we're down another 40%. So the graph is essentially declining the way that we're looking. Now, again, I don't think that's a wakeboard specific thing. I don't think we're doing anything wrong. I would argue that you are seeing it more so on extreme sports in general. And one sport that's actually doing really, really good, that's actually bucking it, is snowboarding. But again, as we talked about, snowboarding is not an extreme sport anymore. Like the business element of snowboarding is not really an extreme sport from like the way that we think of it. It is people enjoying a moment on the slopes.
It's my mom and dad going slowly down
a green. It's great.
Green or blue,
yep, 100%. That's it, and that's what we need. We need that. I think skateboarding is getting just hit as hard, and surfing too, because surfing's a little bit trickier to get out there. Snowboarding's the only one on a positive, and the reason for that is they've figured out how to make it friendly to just beginners. Like, I mean, they really do hold your hand there if you want. Like, I was looking at this, like, half-day lesson was like $1,500. Yeah, but you get everything you need, and you got your own little personal
You better
side.
get everything you need and some.
Yeah, I guarantee you it's full. Like, that's the thing. So
Well,
they're at that point.
That's the other thing, and I'm curious your thoughts on people comparing, you know, the snow industry to the wake industry, and we'll get into that in a second. But, or we can get into it right now. I guess it's a good time. So a lot of people make comparisons. Two comparisons a lot of people make is they compare Europe to the United States when it comes to wakeboarding, cable wakeboarding, and they also compare ski resorts to cable parks when it comes to wakeboarding. What are some flaws if someone were to just say something as simple as, well, Europe has it figured out, why can't we do it here? Or we'll start with that one, I guess. Well, Europe figured out wakeboarding, why can't we?
Yeah, no, 100% they did. It's great. Like, I can't wait to go on a big European tour there with all the different cables. But there's a lot of external factors, I would say. The biggest one to me is there has been cable wakeboarding for a lot longer. You know, Ski Rixen was the first one, I believe it was 1987 or 89, one of those 2 years. I mean, you've had cable parks in Germany since the 50s. So you've had grandparents Vasa skiing on the lake, and they understand that. Yeah, wakeboarding wasn't existing, but they've been to a cable park, and thus that is the same, you know, essential water sport activity. So then they bring their sons bring their grandparents. So you just have a much bigger element of it. Another big thing, honestly, with Europe and the US is it's a lot easier to access lakes in the US and just get boats and gasoline and things like that. Whereas like that experience is actually a lot trickier in Europe and Germany with different regulations. So that's kind of a different one. I would say that's a little bit more minor compared to the generational element, though.
Yeah, and I would say when people compare, like, well, it's easy to get on the lake in America. It's like, well, we have over 50 million people. Not a good massive portion of them are never going to get on the water on a boat. So, like, if you're a cable park, I really wouldn't concern myself with the whole boating crowd. Concern yourself with the people, you know, just people who can't boat or won't boat or are not interested in boating. Like, that's a whole different millions of people. You know what I mean?
I completely agree, and that's why like usually the big one to me is generational.
Yeah, for sure.
Like
Education
I look
to
at
the
I look at
generations.
snowboard. Then so we'll go into the second question. What's the difference there? There's the biggest one again is the generational. You know, you have people growing up that love the mountains there, and I think the other thing, I mean, one of the big ones is you know the snow industry got so big that insurance became such a problem that the states stepped in and they're like, we're going to help subsidize this because we want tourism.
Well, and in Michigan, I'm pretty sure if you buy a lift ticket, like that's your waiver, and it's like pretty ironclad in terms of like you're not going to sue the ski resort. Like, 100%. You got to go through the state.
Yeah, 100%. They're not going to let that happen. I mean, I remember when I went to Langenfeld and I was like, where do I fill out the waiver? And they're like, you buy your ticket. I was like, okay. And you know, you've been through our waiver. You're going to initial a ton of times in a bunch of different spaces.
People are still going to see you.
Oh no, I mean, it's so crazy how that way, like, again, the waiver does do a lot when it comes to acknowledging that, but that's not going to stop someone from being like, I can't believe I got hurt at your action park for, there's one where someone's like, the cable malfunctioned because they missed the buoys. So it just kind of pulls you. It's like, and then it's like, if only I knew that. And I was like, well, we got the safety video right there that shows you how to take a turn.
And you marked that you said you watched it. So,
but that's 100%. I think that's the big difference there. Generational, number one. And I think, again, we will get to that point in time. But number two is really just some of the bigger issues. As you get bigger, then you're going to get more, like, I'm sure the state, when they were doing the subsidization, there's a bunch of skiers that were like, yeah, we can't let this go, in powerful positions. And that's starting to happen now too. Like, again, you got to think of every time we make a wakeboarder or a water sports person, when they get into an influential position, you know, they still love it. So that is another massive benefit.
For it,
it honestly, the big issue that I think we run in with governments a lot, or just even like corporate events or things we do, is, water's scary. Like that's still a major one. And I get it, because there is a set of the population that, you know, is not water familiar. They don't know how to swim. So it makes a lot of sense in that level, but a lot of people shut the door on it really quickly because of those elements, just because they don't have an understanding of it.
Yeah, 100%. I think a lot of people also compare, you know, the ski industry to wakeboarding, and there are definitely some similarities you can draw, and, you know, you can learn from the ski and snowboard industry, but there's also some just glaring massive differences that, like, you make them almost apples to oranges, where it's like, I can't compare throughput on a six carrier cable to the uphill capacity of like 1,400 people an hour on one chairlift on a high speed at a ski resort. It's like,
it's 100%. And I think one of my favorite ones to kind of, and we were talking about this, you know, it comes up every once in a while as like a professional rider where you'll look at the other sports and you'll be like, man, if only, you know, why don't I get as much? Look at these skaters, how much they're making. Look at these surfers. Look at these snowboarders, what they're getting. And I think one of the numbers to look at is, again, you know, surfing or skateboarding 10 times, you know, ahead of it, snowboarding like 5, and then surfing like 5 too. So in your head, you hypothetically have to take essentially the best riders and, you know, add 10 of them. So you now have 10 Trent Stuckeys and 10 Gavin Stuckeys and 10, you know, all of the really, really good riders out there. So it kind of goes back to that point of, you know, I can see a lot of people making the comparisons, but it's really, really tough when you actually look at the data to then be like, oh, 1, would I even be in this position? And 2, what does it even look like for wakeboarding if we have the throughput of snowboarding? Like, again, I think if we had that snowput, imagine you could build a ski resort anywhere. That's what we're offering with wakeboarding.
I know.
So it's there, but we just need the people, and that, like, there'd be a flood of money when it comes to that model, like really being successful.
And there's also more benefits. I mean, the one big negative I think cable wakeboarding has is throughput. I think that's one of its biggest hurdles. If I was a business owner, I would be concerned about. I would say, well, you know, even if I have 8 carriers, this rope is dragging around for 60% of the time with nobody on it. That doesn't make any sense. I mean, yeah, there are some innovations that once those dominoes do fall in the next, you know, 10, 20, 30 years, I think you'll see more innovations of like, okay, well, we can actually realistically do 2 or 3 start docks on this massive cable and our throughput will increase, you know, X percentage. And that'll be a huge, you know, benefit. But I'm also curious on, so like we're comparing skiing or ski resorts and wakeboarding, and there's also the element of we aren't as weather dependent. So like snowboarding is super weather dependent. I mean, the ski resorts in Michigan this past year didn't open until like January, February, like late January. I don't know. And the operating season is obviously more dependable in a true mountainous area, but like the Midwest, Northeast is a huge segment of the area of the country that has ski resorts that are, you know, now very weather dependent. And if you don't have snow on that Christmas time of the year, you're not looking great. You know, that's where you get a lot of your money. So it's I think it's like a good sell. And if we can kind of figure out the throughput thing, I've said it a bunch of times before, but I think ski resorts would be the perfect, you know, test case. I think if one ski resort kind of bit this off and said, hey, we're gonna, you know, go all in on this restaurant, the aqua park, a whole summer operations to couple with our golf thing to make year-round, you know, operations more possible, I think you would see other ski resorts looking at it and going, oh, wow.
Oh, 100%. If it worked, you would. So, and this is why I think going back to, we need more influencers on like the inside, like people that are wakeboarders, and back to me being nice to people on the fringe, because you never know where they end up going. Yeah, if you have a bunch of business people and they're debating on, do we do this? And like, because I think the biggest one is if you know nothing about cable wakeboarding or anything like that, and you're running a ski resort, are you really going to care about looking into that? I got so much more to worry about, and I have so much more that's proven working, and I have an industry to lean on to say what's working, guys, and none of them have built a cable park.
Yeah.
So I think that again goes to, yeah, we need someone in that room saying, I think this, like, all the points that you're going to bring up, all the points that I'm going to bring up, that any person, it's so complimentary. You would get riders hooked on just both sports so easily. If it was like right there, it would make perfect sense.
You have them all in your email marketing database. You send out a couple emails, they're all going to come and try it. I mean, tens of thousands of people.
I would, like, realistically, if I was in that position, I would say, hey, if you buy like an X pass here, we'll give you the cable park for free. So you keep riding. So then you're on a board. So then, like, and the thing is they have the scale to do that. So again, I think it is going to, and I think we kind of talked about it too, is like, unfortunately, I think like someone's, and again, you know, we're working with Action in the sense of Correct Craft and kind of developing this, but there are some leaps and gambles that someone or business is going to have to take to really go all in on that. Because again, it is uncharted territories. And if you're the one putting up the millions of dollars for it, you know, how supportive are you going to be if you're not passionate about it?
Yeah. Speaking of passion, so would you say your passion for the sport has grown or dwindled since going behind the scenes and being on the industry side of things?
It ebbs and flows. I think, you know, it's one of those things where, you know, find something that you love and you'll do it every day, or is it find something you love and you'll learn to, you know, hate it if you're doing it for work? Because I think there is a mix of that, you know, and I've seen both ends of that spectrum, I would say, in the sense of, it changes the narrative. At times it feels like, my product is widgets, because I'm staring at Excel sheets and I get, top line sales, I get all the expenses. And does it matter that it's wakeboarding? At that point in time, not as much. You know what I mean? I'm just in charge of that area. That being said, it's moments like Ants, Angels, Above the Wake, like talking to the parents.
Seeing a kid get off the dock for the first time.
Oh, man, I'm getting kids in college now that I have for summer camp, and they're like, you remember me? I was like, yeah, I actually do. And it's like,
you're in college now?
Yeah, no, they're taller than me now. And I'm like, whoa. So there's moments for that. I think it ebbs and flows. I think anyone within it, like I would argue it's probably ebbed and flowed for you.
Nope, it's just going up and to the right. That's just me.
Someone, I mean, again, you're having meteoric success here. So
I wouldn't put it that way, but yeah.
Within the industry, I think so.
Psychopathic obsession with wakeboarding is probably why that is happening. But yeah.
Well, I mean,
it always ebbs and flows. Everything does.
Yeah. And I think if you talk to any pro, you know what I mean? There's some days where like, this is absolutely amazing. There's some days where it's like, what did I think I was doing? Like I just think passion ebbs and flows. And realistically, I do tell this a lot to some of like the team is like, protect your passion a bit. You know what I mean? Like really understand. What I will say though is what's really nice is if you do actually really get into something, like I took about like a year off from riding because like I really hurt my shoulder. And I was like, every time I ride just for a little bit, no matter what, it just starts like acting up. So I'm like, let me just take it off. I get back out on the water. I'm like, oh, this is going to suck. And I'm like, man, it's sick just like hitting stuff again. And like, so what's really cool is if you are very passionate about something, when you pick it back up, it's just as fun.
Can never fully die.
And that's why I know all the people in Knight's Wake, when they get back out there on the water. And that's why I'm so optimistic about if you do open all these cable parks across the country, they moved. They're in different places. They're in different locations. They don't have access to a cable park.
Come crawling out of the woodwork.
They will.
Yeah.
Well, what's crazy? When we opened ECP, all of the like people were bringing up boards from like the 90s. They're like, I had this in my garage. Like I just never had, a chance to get back out on so we are there. It just, again, you need that ability to come out and do it. But I will say overall, it ebbs and flows, but it definitely goes up and to the right.
Yeah.
It's one of those things.
If you zoomed out.
Yeah. If you zoom out, it's just kind of, you have your up days, you have your down days, but like the biggest thing is really the feedback. Like, I feel like I'm wired a little bit differently. I know some people are, but like, man, hearing a kid or something or a parent talk about how amazing the park is and what it's meant, like at that point in time, all of the fires I had to put out for whatever period are just so much better. So I think anyone who's in this industry can agree. Cause again, I would say we're probably the highest on the passion scale just cause you have to be.
Well, especially at a time like right now when you're saying when it's kind of at, nearing like an all-time low of just kind of the energy and the money and the parks that are open. It's like, well,
see, that's what I like. Cause what's going to happen. There's gonna be a point where it's going to plateau and it's only passion. Yeah. And then that's when
I think we're pretty close to that point right now.
I would argue that too. Cause I mean, like, again, the big one I trend is extreme sports. That's like my big comparison outlier of it. Because if you think about it, that's what it was when it first started. It's like, look at this action, crazy sport. You want to be action and extreme. Now it's, shifting that model a little bit to, hey, this is a fun hobby for your kid to be outside and learn a lot about that. Like it's completely like it went from the little kid being like, Mom, I want to do this crazy thing to now the mom, like, I want you to get outside. Like exactly what we were saying. So I think there's that pivot, but again, I do think, this is really when you're going to see people who are making a true massive impact. And I think that's kind of what got to my GOAT question at the first one was like, I just think we're in such an infancy. It's so hard to even begin that debate. I mean, you look at like basketball or football and centuries of it to even begin that debate. And who knows who's going to come in 20, 30 years. So I think that's the hard part, especially for us as young as we are.
Yeah. That's infancy is a good way to put that. Cause the sport as a whole really is in its infancy. And I think a lot of people forget to realize that cable wakeboarding, park wakeboarding with rails is what I'm referring to, because I feel like whenever unit came out is when it really kind of started, pre-manufactured rails is when you really started legitimizing park riding, and that isn't that long ago.
That like 100%.
Yeah.
Like realistically, like if you look at the sport and take the sport of wakeboarding and like compare it to snowboarding but even snowboarding, the issue with snowboarding is you probably had a lot more skiers than water sports. So like, again, that's why I think Germany and Europe are so much better is because they have water sport adjacent ones to it. But yeah, we're all very young. We got multiple generations coming up. And I think the people who are very passionate, who continue at it, are going to be rewarded. And that's the best part. And I think the people who are passionate about it now, I think they're going to be the ones to really get rewarded from it with a much solid base, much bigger base. And I mean, you look at kind of the origins of skateboarding and like the first people really kind of pushing it and working how hard they were for kind of developing it. Same thing for surfing, same thing for snowboarding. And I mean, same thing for wakeboarding. Like, again, I do not want to discredit the early days of wakeboarding. There are, we stand on giant shoulders already, but it's one of those things where if you just compare it to that development of it and see how short of a time span it is, I mean, this could just be another ebb and flow. And we zoom back out, eventually just keeps on going.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think it will. I do believe in the product, and you do as well. So how often do you ride then?
So it kind of depends a little bit on where my schedule is for it. I've actually rode a lot this year, which is really great because we're rolling out these Wake Club product where basically it's more of like a group lesson, and I really enjoyed coaching on those ones. So I would say I usually shoot for kind of once a week if it's going good, you know what I mean? Like in that. And like, I would say, again, my peak season is May and April. So like, I'll be out there. That's when I think in May, I probably rode maybe 15 to 20 times. Like
getting out there.
I was putting up numbers and like, it was really cool. I got all the threes finally. I had toe side, backside 3 was the last one that I needed.
You get them switched too, or just all regular?
I'm like, it's really weird because I am regular left foot forward, but Ski Rixen had a single ramp to the right, which meant that all of my tricks were goofy. So
hit him heel side, okay.
Yeah, my harder tricks are kind of goofy. But you know who, when Ollie was on, I have the same thing that he does, where he's left foot if he's strapped in, but if he's on like a surfboard or a skate, he's right foot.
You need to dissect the brains of these people that do this. 1 foot in the front, 1 foot.
I can't explain it. But like even a flow rider, if I try and left, it's like no, and like I can ride switch on a snowboard, but it's so uncomfortable compared to riding regular if it's strapped in. I have no clue what it is. But no, it like I said, it's great to be back on the water. Recently I rode at the Cove, so that's kind of why I mentioned that one. So I was like, I think it was, last week I was there. And the hard part for me is like, what'll happen is I get too carried away with it a little bit. And like, I just feel like I feel it now way more. And I think I need to stretch more. Like it's mainly on my fitness.
That's the thing with cable wakeboarding though, is like, I think it is one of the biggest sports. You compared it to like an Orange Theory thing. It is a workout, man. Like if you wakeboard a lot, you're going to be in pretty good shape. But if you don't wakeboard a lot and then you go back to wakeboarding like you wakeboarded when you wakeboarded a lot, it's hard. It's so hard.
Oh yeah.
Without the muscle, without the core strength, all that stuff, it's very hard to just like dive right back into. So it's something you do have to do, 3 times a week to really kind of like stay.
And then the hard part is how good, what got me is I'm like, maybe a back 5. Yeah. And I'm like, nope, did not get enough air. Like that was not a good idea. And now my back hurts a little bit. So like the hard part is for me, I feel like I get to a point where I really push it. But man, I've had so many moments where you're just kind of out there cruising around the corners and you're just like, I'm so glad that, I have this skill set. Like it feels so nice to have that capability and move on the water. And what's crazy is honestly, like even if you're just edging and doing, butter slides and play, like that's still the same feeling. So it's on so many different levels. And I think that's why, again, you open another cable park, people come back out and they'll just be like, wow, this is really great. I'm, so happy it's here.
Yeah. So. Forgot how good it was to be able to get out in the water. So what's your setup? I mean, when you are riding, what do you got? Boots,
so we got again, I'm prepared for it now. I was like, I got to write this out. So 152 Blacklist is what I'm currently on. Size 12 Team X for the bindings. I'm 18, I think, which is like a little bit ducked out.
18?
It's like a little ducked out, right?
Oh, that 18's out there.
It is. And you know what? I used to be all the way out. I came from like a power stance phase at Rixen. Now I'm in a little bit. Man, I was so Zeechy if you really think about it. I'll never forget. Chad Worrell, the Worrells, first off, are kind of legends at OWC, I would say, for all of the work that they did. So Chad, Eric, they've just done a great. And I mean, those are, again, low-key riders that were so good. Like, there's so many good people that, again, they understand, hey, there's not much opportunity here. I had a great time wakeboarding, but now I have to, join the army or do fire. Like, there's different options, and it happens. But I'll never forget, I did like a handle pass and like Olay on the fun box, which is super Zeechy. Come on, like 100%. But I'll never forget Chad Worrell just being like, Zeech. I was like, what is that word?
You never forget the first time someone tells it to you.
No, yeah. And you know what? The best part about Chad is he meant it in the nicest, friendliest way. Because again, he was part of like the wakeboard club and everything. Yeah, so it was just like, no, it really is the case where like, I know that when they do get back on the wall, because I mean, eventually, like, I love it now when we see people come back to the parks. It's so much fun. And, you know, they come back, and again, people have their lives and whatnot, but much like snowboarding, much like skiing, they come back and they make it their trip. And if you had all of these parks out there, you know, you really could have that entire segment that is snowboarding and snow sports. It is the people, like we were saying, that are just going with their family. That is essentially subsidizing all of the crazy stuff.
Yeah.
And it's great, I think, and that's how it should be. You know, it really should be, you have a base, and the people who want to excel, you know, you just kind of build up from there.
Yeah, and I think you kind of hit on how close it has to be. I think that cable park kind of has to be within 30 minutes of somebody who lives there, because if we're being honest, like, you're not going to make a regular thing out of it if it's, you know, over an hour away. It's just not going to happen.
And one of the saddest things of my life is I've always lived like 40 minutes away from a cable. So I'm actually out in Oviedo, so like slightly north of UCF, 40 minutes to Oda, maybe like a little under there, depending on it. I have like fantasies of like, I just want to live next to a park where like you can walk there, ride, come back. And like, again, you know, things like that are capable eventually for people if you plant that seed. And, you know, I'm just one person talking about it, but I know there's a ton of people out there who, if you gave them the chance to really be by a cable and ride more and do those things, that they will show up. We just need more of them. And every day, every operator out there, again, passing the handle, everyone saying nice things to other riders, that like, you literally are supporting the entire industry when you're nice to other wakeboarders. So I think that's my message on here is, can't everyone be nicer?
Your message is don't be, you know, come on, man, is what your message is. And so I do agree. So in my opinion, I think Orlando should be compared to Salt Lake City in terms of, I think Salt Lake City is a major hub for snow sports. A lot of resorts, tons of the pros live there. We kind of have a similar thing here. A good amount of the pros live here when it comes to the boat side of things, not so much the cable side of things. But I feel like Orlando isn't viewed as much as a hub of wakeboarding as maybe it once was. And I'm curious as to why. I mean, if you agree or disagree, and why or why not.
I would probably agree it's still a hub. Like, I mean, what would be the other?
I guess my view is like nobody's booking flights really to like an ANSI to come to the hub of this area, and obviously people are going to Salt Lake City to go ride Brighton Snowboard Park, like all these crazy resorts, right?
Gotcha.
So it's different, but like I guess maybe if the Orlando, I would expect to have like a bunch of crazy wake parks.
So now that I get the phrasing of it, and I think I'm going to go back to what I've mentioned before. It's just a numbers game. Yeah. And what I point back to too is like the extreme sport element. When I got to OWC and started working there in 2010 or 2011, every single employee there was on a mission trip to OWC for one reason or the other. Like, you know, we had people from the Midwest that moved out there as a group to go, I want to wakeboard. I want to be part of this. You know, every operator was essentially semi-pro. Like it was really that case. And I think, again, what happened is as the money pulled out of the sport, as different things happened where, again, extreme sports on the whole, not necessarily just wakeboarding, that caused, like, I would argue that number of people who are like, my dream is to go to Salt Lake City, Utah was higher in 2010
for sure, yeah,
than it is now. And the problem is we just have a smaller number. So
yeah, you get smaller prize purses, you get energy drink companies pulling out, paying less people.
I mean, that's like,
again, riders. It's like,
yeah, if you don't pay out, I mean, you're going to put your body on the line and you're going to pay for all of it. And one person's going to maybe cover their plane ticket.
Yeah, that's just not it's like tough. Not sustainable, you know? So it's not, got to get over that hump. We're going to rip through some Patreon questions here before we wrap it up. So you kind of covered this one, but we got one from Rich Wheeler here. He had a few, but we kind of covered all the stuff he was talking about. But he says, in addition to an aqua park, what are some other alternative activities that cable parks should be looking into to ensure profitability? He mentions the unit surf pool would be a good option. I want to hear your thoughts.
I love the surf pool. I think it would be a great addition.
I hear a butt coming.
The expenses, it's expensive to
How
run.
much does it cost around?
A lot of money. Like, again, you can reach out to Unit. And again, I think it's great. I think it's probably the best one on there. And I think it does work. Like, the last thing I want to do is be like, oh, Unit, don't make, like, no, keep doing this.
Yeah.
The hard part is the throughput element to it when it comes to that, because you're even lower now. And like, if you don't have, like, in my opinion, you would have to have a certain threshold of the cable park being successful with people in it to then say this is now the premium product that we know we can charge on top of that.
Yeah.
Plus, I'm also like, I'd love to break open some surf parks, like P&L statements. You just don't know. Because in my opinion, the only one that seems to really be doing it correctly, which like for the investment wise, is the Kelly Slater Ranch, just because, again, that's an experience. Yeah. Like you go out there, like, and you know, they know what their target market is.
You're putting up some coin to go do that.
Yeah. So again, if you make a product for a market that doesn't have a limit on their spending, then that's it. Whereas, you know, I know there's one, I think probably they got kind of caught up in development. And I think they're just trying to show people, like, look how much people are clicking on this. But there's like the surf pool. I forget where it's at in Orlando. Did you ever see like an ad for that or anything there?
No.
Oh,
man. I don't think so.
They're trying to build like a surf pool. I forget where, but in their PR, they mentioned it's on an old landfill, which I'm like, who would ever say that with a wave pool there? But they're trying to basically...
You would say...
Yeah, I don't know who said that, but it was every time I see it, it's there. They're like, oh, look at what we reclaimed. I'm like, don't say that. You're on water.
Yeah, come on now.
Come on now. But I think they're trying to find investors. Like, I don't know if it's actually going to... Like, I'd love for it to go through. But again, you just go into the issue of, like, you need a product that anyone can do. So instead of a surf pool, like one that we're looking into now really big is a rock climbing wall. We think that's very, you know, supplemental in the sense of you get people who are climbers, you get people who are wakeboarders, you're kind of doing the same hobby or activity.
Your hands are calloused to shit too.
Yeah, I mean, the same muscles, honestly. Like it's actually a really good like mix. I'm like, hey, if you're a rock climber, get on the water. If you're on the water, get on the
rocks
for training. Yeah, exactly. So, but I think you really want something anyone can do. That would be the one that I point to more. Would be, again, food is a big one. Anyone eats. So that's a really, really low barrier to one. But I think the more you can entice more people to go, the better. You have to understand that wakeboarding there is going to be a filter of people who actually get to the cable and get on the cable. And your goal is to get as many people into the top of the filter so that you can get there.
Yeah, so that's 100% great.
And I would say the surf pool is below the...
Exactly.
Like, yeah, so you're down. Yeah, but again, if you have a fully functioning cable park in the sense of, like, the threshold and the numbers that you need to get to, then, like, Langenfeld has one. And, I mean, obviously, they're associated with Unit, so it's, like, a win-win there. But if I had half of my year booked out to group events, I would totally offer them a surf pool, and it would be a great investment.
Yeah, and yeah, it'd be cool. I still haven't ridden one, though. Have you ridden one? Unit surf pool?
I haven't ridden one. I would love it. Like, I think, and this is the hard part to me is, like, you guys don't think I'd want these things at the park.
Yeah, I mean...
Oh, I don't want new features. I don't.
After hours. What are you talking about?
Quality assurance.
I don't know. For me, the surf pool, I feel like I might get bored kind of quickly on that, but I haven't ridden one, so I don't know. Garrett Cortez is wondering, I might be misremembering, but did you blow your knee out testing boards for an Alliance Gear Guide issue, or was that somebody else?
I think that was one of our riders.
Okay, it wasn't you.
No,
though?
it was. I think it was. I want to say Trevor Jackson. I think we were testing the boards, and he already blew out his knee, unfortunately. And I think he got back on the water, and he blew his knee out again. But we were definitely doing an Alliance demo day, and I do remember him blowing his knee out. I don't know if it was for that, but those things are lining up.
Ugh, okay. I mean, he's probably got something right there.
I was about to say, if he remembers that, because I know.
Happened.
Yeah, it did. Yeah. They did. Those events, we did do a gear guide.
Someone blew their knee out.
And someone did. I don't remember if it was that day. Oh, I felt so bad for him, too.
That would be terrible.
Well, I mean, he was, like, so happy getting back on the wall. And again, it's like, I feel like it's an unlucky thing for, like, knees. It's not like, I mean, that's why I look at snowboard or, like, wakeboarding, snowboarding, skateboarding. The amount of times I put myself in risky situations on a wakeboard and come away with not so serious of an injury versus the amount of times on a snowboard or skateboard and, like, I'm like, ow, are so much higher.
Yeah, you can definitely get it. I mean, it's water. That's what it comes down to.
I look people are always like, oh, water hurts too. I'm like, yeah, but would you rather water or ice or concrete? Like, there's a reason windshield
I'll power rank those right now.
Exactly.
Water, ice, concrete. That's how it goes.
Very easy to do. Like,
and water is a very high leader in that one.
100%.
Last one here from Johnny D. He said you talked about it at WSIA before, but how important do you think local events are for the cable park communities? You kind of touched on it, but...
I do think they're massive, and it is something where, like, in 2022, I did 25 events between 3 of the parks. Like, we really made sure we pushed it. And I think it kind of got to like a little bit of a slight overkill to some degree because,
Yeah.
you know, there's a contest fatigue that does happen.
Kind of water them down a little bit.
I just think the hard part is when it comes to cables and whatnot, and this is why I'm so enthusiastic for John doing what he's doing with the Wake Park League and the WWA, just because, like, realistically, that, in my opinion, should kind of be another entity just so they can take it to more parks. And it adds another level of legitimacy to it. You know, we're still going to look at doing, you know, Slider Spectacular and Jungle Jam and the local ones that we have. But realistically, I mean, those are for, in my opinion, I always hope, like, you're focused on beginners, novice, and intermediate in those local contests. You know, like, as much as I want, like, and again, we're going to have the judges and all of that stuff there, but it opens up so much more. Oh, man, hearing Kevco talk about the judging and protesting, I've encountered so much of that too. And, like, again, I love wake moms, but sometimes wake moms can be a little intense and protective. And my favorite thing is anytime it's a jam and they're like, oh, you know, little Billy should have won. I'm like, first off, how did you watch everyone ride? And they're like,
You were just watching Little Billy.
well, that's what I'm saying. I'm like, how did you watch everyone? And then every once in a while, they'll even be like, oh, I had other people watching them. And I'm like, okay, so you got a group of people. I'm like, who are they? Like, I literally was like, who are they? And they're like, oh, well, this person. And at the end of it, I'm like, wakeboarding is subjective.
Yeah.
And I know, like, I mean, like I said, Trent Stuckey stole first place from me when he was 9 years old.
Savage.
It's so
from
bad
an
too,
early
because
age.
can you imagine if I beat him? I always said it
Well,
would have
you
been
could
so great.
You could put that in the Instagram bio.
Well, I would have beat him, and then I would have had him sign it, a picture of me, because there's a picture you'll see where we're
I'll put
duking out
that
on the
in,
dock. But, like, again, I get with the parents, but the funny part of it, they're like, oh, your judge doesn't know anything. I'm like, my judge was Gunther Oka. I was like, what are you talking about here? So there's a lot of hassles that kind of come with that element.
Yeah.
And it's just like one of those things where, like, that's another, like, I think it's super important. And that's why I think what John's doing in the WWE is incredibly critical too. But it's one of those things where if you have that as the added element on top of the normal park operations, it's really kind of taxing to some degree as well too. Because again, like, it's his own, like, you've heard everyone talking about contests and everything there. It's his own beast. Like, to really do it, to just be in the zone and doing it properly there. Whereas if we're just like, okay, you know, I'm out here on a Sunday doing this event, and then Monday I got my business review, and then I got to do the budget and what's this email going, and, you know, we're like, there's just so much stuff that, and again, you know, that's why I'll say, like, you know, we haven't had as many of the local contests is just because that's the element. But one thing we did talk about was, I think one of the best ways for this sport to grow would be if there is like a peewee sports of wakeboarding, where not necessarily, it wouldn't even involve the pros, in my opinion. It would just be something for the, like, my favorite was junior beginner. Like, we literally had like one where it's like, if you like, and we've had like somewhere it's like, can you ollie over this pool noodle as like some of the element there? And like, that is the huge thing. If we could, I think that's the most sustainable too. Because how many pro wakeboarders are there out there versus how many beginner wakeboarders are out there? And if we can get all of the beginners into the contest scene, I think that's what you see with Points Chase and the WWA and you know, that element there is, if you just really focus in that bottom block, what would that look like as they develop? But that's when you see Billy become Wake Billy, is when he wins his medal for the first time. Yeah. That's when and I mean, I did the same thing. Like, oh, do you tell me after we won a contest at UCF, I was like, yeah, national title, you know, all this. And again, it's, you know, when I look at it now, it's hilarious.
Did some of the boys carry us here? Yeah, maybe.
Awesome. I mean, again, I was out there. I just made sure you guys showed up on time, and then I get to carry it. But it's one of those things where it means so much then, and you look back and you're like, oh, like, and that's the hard part too. Is like, you look back now and you're like, oh, okay, yeah, that. But for the kid who was riding, who won first, like, and I love those moments. I mean, it was really, really cool seeing like riders develop and move through the ranks and do things like that. So I think it's super important. And again, what can we do? Support John, support what he's doing. You know, we got a local event this Saturday coming up for the well, probably not this Saturday. I just realized the podcast isn't going to go out for a while. So you can cut this.
It was past Saturday.
Yeah, I was going to say, you can cut this out. Support what John's doing, support what the USA or the US Wake League's doing with the WWA, and again, go into these with like a grain of salt too. You know, one of the conversations I had was like, one parent was like, oh, you need to do this, and this. And like, when I have this equestrian event, they do this.
Can you just relax and freaking do this wakeboard contest and not try and solve all the problems all at once? I mean, just enjoy it for a little bit.
Thank you. Because that's exactly what I'm thinking. But my first question was like, how much you pay for the equestrian event? She's like, She's like, $800. I was like, listen, you give me $800 an entry fee, I will carry your kid to the dock.
We'll have this thing.
It'll be a 30-pound medal. Like we'll go. So that's why I just say, give us a grain of salt. Cause again, like that's just another thing that you look at. Like there is a big enough business to support the equestrian league that people are getting paid just to do the equestrian league. Like, I think the biggest one is just if people listening can have some awareness of where we're at as an industry, I think it would make it so much better. Because I almost feel like we got a little big for our britches to some degree with extreme sports blowing up, just in the sense of like it feels like wakeboarding so much larger than if you actually get on the inside and see what it really is. Yeah. And I think that's been the biggest reveal to me. And I think it's probably the biggest reveal to pro riders when they get to the top of kind of like an element there is
they're like, this is my monthly check from my board brand.
Yeah.
Well, it's like, well,
I mean, that's again, and the board brand, like nothing would make the board brand happier than paying you more because that means they're making more. Like that's the big thing. Like there's no evil people hoarding anything over here. It's just us.
They're pulling money from the tube sales to give it to you on the wakeboard side. Like, I mean, that's probably what's going on. So
100%. So if you just look at it with that perspective, I think it would make the sport so much healthier. And everyone would have more fun. That's why college contests are the best. Never once did I have anyone complain about college contests. They were just like, this is great. Like, sign us up.
Yeah, nobody's in any mental state to complain about contests, too. I don't think there either. And I think just to hit on that before we wrap this up, I think a good balance of, like, traditional contests, like you're saying, this Pee Wee thing or points chase, all that stuff. Well, also, like, as a park, doing some unique stuff on your own that isn't, necessarily catering to the kid who wants the trophy or the medal, but caters to the kid who wants to have like a team experience that's like different and fun. Like I've run a couple events with Dan at West Rock, and it was called Rip Fest, and it's like a whole different point scoring system, kind of like golf, and like you're doing goofy things, like you got to spin a 1080 across a box, or like just random weird shit that like is a little bit different. I think a good balance between all that really helps to bring all the kids that are in, these sports, because some kids who do wakeboarding aren't interested in the competition side of things. Like I'm not interested when I got into snowboarding, wakeboarding. I didn't want to compete. I never wanted to compete. I wanted to just express myself, I guess. I don't know. I didn't have that thought at the time, but like that's probably what it was. I just thought it was cool. So like if you can try and have a big broad brush of like what you're doing at a park, I think that probably would helps a lot of just bring everybody in, inclusivity, like you're saying.
Oh, 100%. And I mean, that's really, I think, what it comes down to is the more inclusive we can be as a sport. And I know we talked cable heavy, but it's the same thing with boat. You know what I mean? The more you can bring people out there and get them into it and get them doing things. And I think, again, if you had the Pee Wee League, kind of like what I'm saying, the pros would all be making way more money because the Pee Wee would then feed to the pro. Like, we got to build the base, and it's only going to move up. And that's why, again, my biggest task for everyone listening, all the pros out here and everything there, be nice to someone at the park. Be nice to someone, offer it. I know we do pass the handle, which is massive, and it's a great step, but really do that commitment. Like one thing I really like with the collegiate wakeboarding side of things is like there's incentive for the, presidents to develop the team. So it's not just like, hey, I took you wakeboarding, see you later. It's like, no. Like, try this, try that, try these things. So those are the big ones. And again, I just want to give a massive shout out to our community. Like I really, like in every wake park community, there is amazing people at every single park that don't get the recognition that they deserve. One I am going to shout out to is just Jason and Shannon Stuckey. Now, obviously, they're probably a lot more well-known when it comes to just,
Well, they got the Stuckey last name. You see that on a podium
Jason,
every weekend.
It's Jason the Creator. I love that. He's also a great announcer. Have you ever heard Jason announce?
No, I haven't.
Oh, my gosh. This is hilarious. I love it. Jason's fantastic. But they're doing it all with passion. And the way that they interact with the community is so... Like, not only are they giving sage advice, obviously, in the sense of like, hey, this is what you want to do, being safe, fundamentals, all of those, but they're just very, very active in the little touches of, what's your name? Like, oh, what are you learning? What are you doing? And like, I cannot express that. If every single member had that same mentality, the parks would be so much more successful.
Yeah.
And I mean, like, I look at myself of how many people I've brought to OWC, like literally picked them up in my truck in college, get in, all the boards here. You just got to pay $20. Come on out here. That mentality is so huge. And like I said, you never know when that creates the influential person who then gets us in the board meeting, who then gets it. Like it's that tipping point. Like that was great when you brought it up. 'Cause I'm like, that's exactly it.
Yeah, for sure. 100%. I think we covered a lot. This was a great pod. I know we could, there's unlimited things we could dive in on cable park operations and stuff, but I think we touched on a good bit of it. And I think have you on again at some point, maybe a shop talk, and we can get Daniel Jarrett in here. That'd be a good one. But is there anything you want to touch on before we wrap this up? And anybody we want to thank?
I think if we had a shop talk with Dan and a few of the cable park owners, it'd be like a 10-hour episode.
Well, yeah, I would have to keep it moving. That's for sure.
Exactly. I think the last shout out is just going to be to you again, Hunter. Like, I started it with this, but this is such a breath of fresh air to see, someone, again, very passionate about it. Like I'm sure there's other podcast subjects that are potentially more lucrative for the market size and things like that.
I think every single one, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. We're pretty low toward the bottom of the end. But what you're doing and what you're capturing and what all of these things and, like, again, giving me a platform to now be like, hey, because, I have these conversations with individuals and cable park owners, anything there. This conversation that we've had, again, expressing my opinions, is going to be heard by more people than I've probably been able to individually talk to. And, like, again, I know I can yap a lot when it comes to talking about wakeboarding and things like that. But I really do want to show some appreciation for that. And just, again, if everyone can just be a little bit more inclusive, support wakeboarding, support Grab Matters, support your cable park. Like, we're all doing this so that we can have a better sport. And if we all chip in and if we all work at it, we get to that tipping point closer, and then we get to look back and say, wow, look what we built. That's going to be the fun part.
Yeah.
Like I said, the fun part is, this is just a little ebb, and then we're going to continue to move on up. And the experience, the logistics, it all makes sense. We just need a few things to fall into place, and I think, we'll have a much, much bigger audience for not only Grab Matters, but just everything wakeboarding.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you for the kind words. That definitely does mean a lot. It's very much appreciated. And I think I'll just touch on real quick before I wrap this up. Yeah, support, buy the pro model board of the person you like, or buy their vest, or, all that stuff. Like, just support what you like seeing rather than, with your money. If you need a new vest, buy the vest with the dude's name on it. Or if you need a new board, and, like, buy the dude with the board's name. Like, do that stuff.
Support the brands that support us. But even if you don't have the money for it, like and comment.
There you go.
Like, again, a lot of these pros out there with their different deals, they're getting tracked on if you're liking and commenting on that. So there's no reason that you can't just be overly supportive of everyone in wakeboarding. And if you really want this to grow, if you want more opportunity, it's exactly that. So like and follow, do all of that fun stuff as much as you probably don't like saying it.
I'll say it right now.
There you go, 100%, because that's how we get better. And, I know how amazing this community is. It's just a matter of time before we really get there.
Yeah, absolutely. And I agree with that. So, yeah, thanks for coming on. This was a blast. This was a good chat. I had a lot of fun. Thanks, everybody, for listening. As you guys know, like, comment, subscribe, as Kellan was saying. If you're listening to the podcast on Apple or Spotify, make sure to rate 5 stars. That really helps. And if you do enjoy the chat, the biggest thing you can do is to just share it with somebody. Share it on social media, whatever you guys feel like doing, if you guys did enjoy it. And thank you to all the Patreon subscribers. It means a lot. So, till next time. See you guys.